Chapter 301, Dumbledore's Army and the Society of Stars. Harry had a dream. He was navigating a windowless corridor, his footsteps echoing ominously in the silence. As he approached the door at the corridor's end, his heart raced with anticipation and dread. He reached out, his fingers mere inches from the door, longing to push it open, yet also to push it away. "Harry Potter, sir?" Harry was jolted awake. The candles in the common room had been snuffed out, casting shadows across the room. The fire was dwindling, barely illuminating the darkened space. "Who's there?" Harry sat up, his voice tense with apprehension. "Dobby has brought your owl, sir." A high-pitched voice broke the silence, accompanied by the sight of a small figure moving in the dim light. It was Dobby, the free house elf who had taken up employment at Hogwarts. Perched atop Dobby's comically stacked hats was Hedwig, Harry's owl. The last time Hedwig had been injured while delivering a message, Harry had entrusted her to Professor Grapplin's care. It was clear that Hedwig had been well looked after, now quietly hooting atop Dobby's head. Harry stared at Dobby, taken aback by the sight. The elf's ears were flattened under the weight of numerous hats, all knitted by Hermione, making him appear taller. "Dobby volunteered to bring back Harry Potter's owl," Dobby declared with unwavering enthusiasm. Professor Grapplen said she was ready to return. He bowed so deeply that his nose brushed against the worn carpet, causing Hedwig to flutter to the arm of Harry's chair with a disgruntled cry. Harry gently stroked Hedwig's head and expressed his gratitude to Dobby. As he tried to shake off the remnants of his dream, Harry noticed the assortment of clothes adorning Dobby. "Did you take all the clothes Hermione left here?" he asked hesitantly. "Oh no, sir," Dobby replied cheerfully. "Dobby also took some for Winky." Harry, recalling the house elf struggling with alcoholism, inquired, "How is Winky doing?" "Winky's still drinking, sir," Dobby admitted with a hint of sadness. He then explained the current state of affairs regarding the house elves' treatment of Gryffindor Tower. They refused to clean it anymore, hiding hats and socks everywhere, deeming them insulting. Dobby had taken it upon himself to clean Gryffindor Tower, collecting the items Hermione had left behind. Dobby always wanted to meet Harry Potter, and tonight, as usual, he did. Dobby bowed once more, then timidly asked, "Dobby heard you talking in your sleep. Were you having a nightmare, Harry Potter?" Harry, recalling the unsettling dream, rubbed his eyes and yawned. "I've had scarier," he admitted. Dobby's ears drooped as he earnestly offered, "Dobby wants to help Harry Potter because Harry Potter freed Dobby and brought him happiness." "You can't help with this, but thank you," Harry responded, knowing the complexity of his problems and still puzzled by his dream. As he picked up his potions textbook from the floor, an idea struck him. "Actually, Dobby, there is one thing you could help me with." Dobby's eyes lit up, eager to assist. "Speak, Harry Potter, sir." "I need a place where 27 people can practice defense against the dark arts without being noticed by the teachers," Harry explained, his grip tightening on the textbook. "Especially Professor Umbridge." Expecting this request to stump Dobby, Harry was surprised when the elf leaped up in excitement. "Dobby knows the perfect place," he exclaimed. "The other elves have mentioned it. We call it the come-and-go room, or the room of requirement." Harry was taken aback, having not expected such a straightforward solution from Dobby. He remembered Dumbledore mentioning this place during last year's banquet, humorously recounting his discovery of a room filled with chamber pots when he was in need of a toilet. Thrilled by this revelation, Harry learned the room's location from Dobby. The next day, he shared the news with Hermione and Ron. Together, they informed the other students who had signed up at the Hog's Head to gather at 8 o'clock on the 8th floor, opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. In the intricate tapestry of Hogwarts, a new thread was woven by Harry, Hermione, and Ron as they ventured to the 8th floor at 7:30 in the morning. To avoid detection, Harry brought along the Marauder's map, a precaution that proved wise as they observed the empty corridors. Following Dobby's cryptic instructions, they paced back and forth 3 times, Hermione quietly voicing their need for a place to learn combat. Their focused intent summoned the Room of Requirement, a door materializing seamlessly into the wall. Upon entering, they were greeted by shelves laden with books on defense against the dark arts, a mirror that once belonged to the imposter Moody, and a humanoid target reminiscent of those used by Professor Hild. Hermione, ever the curious scholar, was drawn to a black book that stood out among the rest. It was The Tales of Beetle the Bard, a collection of stories that captivated her immediately. As the clock struck 8, other students began to trickle in, each one marveling at the existence of such a room within Hogwarts. Fred and George Weasley, in particular, were puzzled, recalling a time when the room served as a mere broom closet. Amidst the wonder, Hermione suggested the election of a leader, and Harry was chosen without hesitation. They brainstormed names for their group, eventually settling on the Defense Association, or DA for short, humorously noting its coincidence with Dumbledore's army. This name resonated with Harry, reminding him of his parents' involvement in the Order of the Phoenix. Meanwhile, in a stark contrast to the DA's noble pursuits, Draco Malfoy and the members of the Star Club were focused on physical prowess and magical mastery. After Quidditch practice, Malfoy's arrogance was on full display, despite the efforts of his peers to keep him grounded. Neville Longbottom and Malfoy, now key figures in the Star Club, had grown significantly in strength, capable of challenging even seasoned wizards. John, a supporter of the club, had recently gifted them equipment that further enhanced their capabilities. This development, however, did not go unnoticed by the faculty. Professor McGonagall and others lamented the students' lack of basic defensive spells, a reflection of the inconsistent quality of Defense Against the Dark Arts instruction over the years. As the Quidditch season resumed, Malfoy eagerly anticipated defeating Harry and Gryffindor, meticulously preparing his prized firebolt for the match. His rivalry with Cedric Diggory, another talented seeker in the Star Club, was marked by Malfoy's boastful taunts, despite Cedric's more modest demeanor. The contrasting paths of Dumbledore's army and the Star Club highlighted the diverse approaches to strength and preparation within Hogwarts. While one group sought knowledge and unity, the other pursued physical dominance and individual prowess, setting the stage for inevitable clashes both on and off the Quidditch field. Chapter 302: The Black Lake and the Great Octopus. Draco Malfoy was busier than ever. Since his third year, Slytherin House had adopted a new approach, though it was more a change in style than substance. With the introduction of rigorous training sessions, the Slytherin Quidditch team had become a force to be reckoned with, practicing come rain or shine. Thanks to Professor Snape's partiality towards the Slytherin team, they often had the Quidditch pitch to themselves, which had been restored to its original state after being temporarily transformed into a maze the previous semester. On this particular day, a torrential downpour, punctuated by occasional flashes of lightning, enveloped the pitch. Amidst this storm, a flash of gold darted across the field. Malfoy, in pursuit of the snitch, his waterproof goggles shielding his eyes, accelerated on his firebolt. The rain felt like whips against his skin, but he pressed on, his focus unwavering. "Keep the formation!" Captain Montague shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the rain, which he inadvertently swallowed, causing him to cough violently. They were practicing a new tactical formation, with Malfoy chasing the snitch. The golden snitch swooped down, and Malfoy mirrored its movements. After a brief, intense chase, victory was decided in mere seconds. Malfoy, with a swift movement of his right hand, caught the snitch while expertly controlling his firebolt with his left. His muscles tensed as he maneuvered the broomstick, coming to a halt just inches from the Quidditch goalpost. Relaxing his tense body, his wet hair plastered to his face, he allowed himself a small smile of triumph. "Great job, Draco. You did it," Montague cheered, landing alongside the rest of the team. This particular maneuver had been practiced countless times, often resulting in Malfoy tumbling to the ground. On one occasion, he had even been knocked unconscious. Yet, the Slytherins celebrated, with Crabbe and Goyle, who had taken over as beaters following the graduation of their predecessors, showing promising form. However, the pressure was immense. Slytherin's philosophy of the survival of the fittest meant that anyone not up to par risked being cut from the team. This created a palpable tension among the reserve players, who dreamt of securing a spot on the team. After the training session, Malfoy quickly changed out of his uniform and made his way to the Black Lake, his determination causing a stir among his teammates. Montague remarked, "Why doesn't everyone train as hard as Draco?" The others nodded in agreement, the ambition clear in the eyes of the substitutes. They wondered if they, too, could earn such recognition through sheer effort. At the Black Lake, Malfoy found Neville Longbottom waiting for him. Neville, having shed his loose wizard robes, was warming up, his forearms' muscles visible as he effortlessly lifted two large stones connected by wooden sticks. Malfoy, fresh from Quidditch practice, smirked disdainfully at the sight. Stripping off his own robe, he revealed a physique markedly different from Neville's, lean and powerful, like a leopard ready to pounce, in stark contrast to Neville's bear-like strength. Their rivalry, sparked by a disagreement over who would face whom in a challenge, was palpable. "No, you go against the dragon. It nearly knocked my head off last time," one argued. "I want to face Longbottom. The dragon lost last time, so I'm not interested," the other countered. Malfoy's frustration grew as he listened to their bickering. Eventually, it was the more rebellious and independent of the two who agreed to take on Malfoy's challenge. As they prepared to start, Neville suddenly asked, "What is John doing?" Malfoy looked up to see John at the edge of the Black Lake, his hands submerged in the water. John's expression was one of concern, and without a word, he dove into the murky depths. Moments later, the surface of the lake erupted with activity as more than a dozen heads emerged. Mermaids, Grindylows, and other denizens of the Black Lake, all seemingly fleeing from something terrifying. John, meanwhile, continued his descent to the bottom of the lake, using a polymorph spell to adapt his lungs for underwater breathing, ready to face whatever lay in the depths. John's breath was sufficient to sustain him underwater for the entire day. As he ventured deeper into the Black Lake, a Grindylow approached him with a mischievous intent. "It seems our friend prefers to hide in the depths of the Black Lake," John mused, squinting through the murky waters in search of the elusive giant octopus. His determination was palpable. "If it won't come out willingly, I'll have to force its hand." An intimidating aura emanated from John, startling the approaching Grindylow. The creature, sensing something formidable, fled in terror. This aura of coercion spread through the water, causing the lake's inhabitants to scatter, leaving John in a deserted underwater landscape. With the creatures of the Black Lake fleeing from his presence, John reached out to grasp a water plant, channeling his elemental magic in an attempt to communicate with the spirit of the lake. He hoped to summon the giant octopus to his side. Despite several attempts, there was no response. The spirit of the Black Lake remained silent, John realized, his spirits dampening. It appeared he would have to locate the creature on his own. He pointed his wand forward, casting the Super Sense spell. His mind expanded, encompassing everything within a vast radius of the Black Lake. As he moved, he periodically released his coercive aura to clear the area of creatures, followed by the use of his Super Sense spell. This methodical approach continued for several hours as he navigated the lake's depths, undeterred by the crushing water pressure that would have overwhelmed an ordinary person. Meanwhile, in Slytherin House, there was a particular spot favored for its view of the Black Lake. The transparent glass there offered a glimpse into the underwater world, its allure enhanced by a subtle, mystical glow. This spot had become a romantic haven for young Slytherin couples, spurred by the saying, "If you love her, take her to see the mermaid in the Black Lake." This tradition, however, was born from the mischievous minds of upperclassmen, as the mermaids and other lake inhabitants often frightened the younger students with their menacing appearances. On this day, a group of Slytherin seniors watched with amusement as a pair of unsuspecting third-year students awaited the appearance of a mermaid. Pansy Parkinson scoffed at the scene, her disdain evident. Daphne Greengrass gave her a puzzled look, recalling Pansy's participation in similar pranks just days before. Pansy, caught in Daphne's gaze, dramatically clasped her face, proclaiming her newfound benevolence towards the younger students. Her attention, however, quickly shifted to a Slytherin boy in the crowd, prompting a whispered exchange between Astoria Greengrass and Daphne about Pansy's romantic interests. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a collective gasp from the crowd. Turning to see the cause of the commotion, they were stunned to find John, walking through the water with an ease that defied explanation, especially since he wasn't using the bubblehead charm. The onlookers, including the young couple and the mischievous seniors, were captivated by the sight of John moving confidently through the lake. Pressing his palms against the glass, John's voice resonated in the minds of the young couple. "Did you see the big octopus?" The question, unexpected and mysterious, left them in awe, as they realized they were witnessing something truly extraordinary. John found himself standing before two students whose mouths were agape, as if they could each swallow an egg whole. They were wildly gesturing, leaving John no choice but to hear them out directly. "I just saw the giant squid heading that way," the girl of the pair pointed, her finger directing John's gaze towards a certain direction where the giant squid was known to occasionally roam near Slytherin. Acknowledging their information, John nodded and proceeded to wade through the water in the indicated direction, leaving a cluster of Slytherin students behind, who looked on as if they were in a trance. In the wake of his departure, rumors began to swirl. Before long, whispers filled the corridors, claiming that John possessed mermaid blood in his veins. The rumors didn't stop there. Some even suggested that catching a glimpse of John underwater would bring a person good fortune, granting them the chance to end up with their heart's desire. Consequently, the glass window overlooking the spot where John was often seen became a sought-after location within Slytherin. Students flocked there, hoping to catch a glimpse of him beneath the waves, each harboring their own wishes and dreams. The once mundane view had transformed into a window of wonders, all because of the mysterious allure surrounding John's aquatic adventures. Chapter 303, Talent and Effort. By the Black Lake, Neville and Malfoy were taking a rare break from their usual exercises. They watched the sun dip behind the mountains, an unspoken tension hanging between them. "John, will he?" Malfoy began, his voice trailing off as if afraid to finish the thought. Neville remained silent for a moment before responding, "He won't, but you will." "What are you talking about?" Malfoy exclaimed, his anger flaring. Neville simply nodded towards something behind Malfoy, a reassuring look in his eyes. "You really will." Feeling a chill, Malfoy turned to see Daphne's face, her beauty marred by a frosty expression. With a sad smile, Malfoy stood up, his resolve firm. "Today, even if I face death, I remain undaunted." Ouch! His declaration was cut short as he found himself suddenly hanging upside down from a tree. Meanwhile, Daphne waited by the lake, hoping for John's return. Following the directions given by a young couple, John discovered a place beneath the Black Lake that resembled a mermaid village. The lake was vast, its depths home to ancient ruins that suggested it might not have always been a body of water. In the ruins, John encountered a giant octopus, a creature so large that its entire form was seldom seen, usually just its tentacles. Lying atop a pile of collapsed ruins, the octopus slept, its tentacles gently swaying with the water's flow. John was tempted to approach and draw its blood, but he knew the risks involved if the creature were to awaken and flee. Using psychic magic, John attempted to communicate with the octopus. As he touched a tentacle, a flood of images overwhelmed him, causing him to gasp for air. The octopus, mistaking him for a student in distress, tried to rescue him, but John managed to halt its movements with his wand. Realizing direct mind probing was ineffective, John switched to spiritual magic for communication. "Put me down, big guy," he requested, and the octopus complied, its large eyes filled with confusion. John introduced himself as a Slytherin student, but the octopus's ancient mind made communication difficult. Eventually, John had to surface for air, assisted by the creature's tentacles. Upon reaching the shore, John was greeted by the sight of Malfoy still hanging upside down. Daphne, concerned, asked if he was all right. John reassured her, explaining his attempt to communicate with the octopus. Malfoy, now righted, was incredulous at the idea of talking to an octopus. John admitted the difficulty due to the creature's age and decided to postpone further attempts at communication. In the days that followed, the excitement of the Quidditch game revived Hogwarts' spirit, despite Umbridge's oppressive presence. After a stern warning from John, Umbridge dared not interfere with the Slytherin students, fearing they might complain to the Ministry of Magic. Slytherins were known for their connections, and Umbridge's influence seemed to wane, at least within their house. However, the other houses were not so fortunate, finding themselves under Umbridge's strict control. Over the course of 3 days, not only the students but even the deans voiced their complaints. In such a climate, Slytherin's practice sessions proceeded with remarkable ease and efficiency. After Harry established the DA, he felt as though he had donned a talisman, a fervent secret that sustained him amidst Umbridge's tyranny. Even the dreadful gaze of Umbridge's toad-like eyes could be met with a serene smile. Indeed, challenging times breed heroes. Leading the oppressed towards resilience invariably fosters growth. The primary challenge, however, was the inability to schedule special training sessions for every student simultaneously. The Quidditch practice schedules of the 3 houses complicated their ability to convene. Thankfully, Hermione was always there to lend a hand when needed. She crafted a magical silver coin, akin to the galleon. This device, reminiscent of the Dark Mark, yet not inscribed upon the arm, allowed for efficient communication of trainings, Essenes through changes in its numerals. "Why didn't I know you could do this?" Ron marveled. Hermione responded with a triumphant, "There's a lot more you don't know about me." Harry was elated, knowing that notifications for special training could now be swiftly disseminated. Their sole concern was the accidental expenditure of these counterfeit galleons. To this, Ron morosely assured there was no need to worry, as poverty ensured these were the only galleons he possessed. The season's inaugural Quidditch match pitted Gryffindor against Slytherin, reigniting the rivalry between these two venerable teams, now under new leadership following the graduation of their previous captains. Professor McGonagall, a fervent Quidditch enthusiast, excused the Gryffindor team from homework in the week leading up to the match to allow for additional practice. Not to be outdone, Snape secured an early booking for the Slytherin team to use the pitch, embodying the cunning and determination synonymous with Slytherin House. John observed Malfoy, who, with a week until the match, seemed to be training relentlessly through wind, rain, and mud. Montague, unable to watch any longer, rushed over and embraced Malfoy, still poised to launch the firebolt, and exclaimed, "Draco, enough! You've practiced plenty." Malfoy, persistent, pushed Montague away and declared while mounting the firebolt, "More training is needed to compete with Potter." Montague, at a loss for words, finally muttered, "You've done enough." "Not enough. It's never enough," Malfoy retorted. "Do you realize how fast Harry Potter can fly? He's been a seeker since his first year. His talent is unmatched. Indeed, if one were to identify the most naturally gifted Quidditch player at Hogwarts, Harry Potter would be the undisputed choice." From his first year, his innate flying prowess caught Professor McGonagall's eye the moment he first grasped a broomstick. Malfoy, despite his early start and years of experience, found himself overshadowed. In his first year, he failed to make the team. In his second, he watched as Harry captured the golden snitch right before his eyes. And in his third, the snitch eluded him once more. The question of where he fell short was moot. A superior broomstick couldn't bridge the gap in talent. Malfoy understood that his loss stemmed from a lack of innate ability. With equal training, Harry achieved far more, compelling Malfoy to exert exponentially more effort to close the gap. Driven by a desire to win and the indomitable spirit of Slytherin, Malfoy was determined to triumph. However, the strain of relentless practice took its toll. After a fall from the firebolt left him slightly dazed, the golden snitch appeared before him. But in Malfoy's vision, multiple snitches fluttered about. Shaking his head, he urged the firebolt forward, but his vision darkened and he lost his grip, plummeting from a great height. The realization dawned on his teammates too late to avert the fall. Just before he was about to hit the ground, Malfoy came to an abrupt halt. The rain around him condensed into a makeshift waterbed, cushioning his fall. John, having walked past Montague, suggested, "Let's split up and get ourselves in the best possible shape before the match." The Queen Mother, who had reacted a bit slowly to the unfolding events, saw John and breathed a sigh of relief. She then issued an order for the other team members to disperse. Observing Malfoy, who had pushed himself to the point of being covered in bruises, John guided him in a different direction. "Malfoy, you've pushed yourself too hard," John remarked, concern evident in his tone. "It's important to train, but you need to know your limits. Pushing yourself to the brink isn't going to make you stronger. It's just going to wear you down. Malfoy, looking somewhat defiant yet exhausted, nodded reluctantly. I know, but I can't help it. I feel like I have so much to prove. John placed a reassuring hand on Malfoy's shoulder. You have nothing to prove to anyone but yourself, and the best way to that is by taking care of yourself first. Let's get you patched up and rested before the game. We need you at your best, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. As they walked away from the practice field, the rain began to lighten and the clouds started to part, hinting at clearer skies ahead. It was a fitting metaphor for Malfoy's current state, John thought. With the right care and support, he too would find his way out of the storm he'd been navigating alone. Chapter 304, Confrontation with Malfoy. It was night when Malfoy awoke, his wounds miraculously healed. Rising to his feet, his first concern was for his firebolt, which, to his relief, lay undamaged beside him. Montague, let's continue, he said, only to realize that he wasn't on the Quidditch pitch. Confused, he looked up to see John sitting nearby, leisurely reading a book. John, Malfoy began, hastily getting up. Noticing his injuries had healed, he attempted a casual departure. I'll be off then, John. But as he moved to leave, a humanoid target sprung to life, launching him across the room. He found himself blocked by two more figures at the door, effectively trapping him inside. Puzzled, Malfoy turned to John, seeking an explanation. John closed his book with a soft thud and met Malfoy's gaze with a chuckle. It seems you're eager to demonstrate your strength, he observed. Malfoy, taken aback, stammered, I haven't. If that's the case, allow me the honor of testing it, John interjected, rising gracefully and approaching the dueling ring. I trust you haven't forgotten the lessons from the dueling club, he added, pointing his wand at Malfoy. A formidable pressure compelled Malfoy to bow, a gesture John returned with a smirk. Show me your strength, Draco. As Malfoy straightened, he found John's gaze cold and indifferent. The forced bow had left him gasping for air, but he wasted no time in launching a series of spells at John. John, with effortless grace, deflected each attack with his wand. At the right moment, John summoned two large dogs that clamped down on Malfoy's feet. Impedimento! Malfoy reacted swiftly, halting John's advance. He managed to repel the dogs with two blasts of red light, his determination flaring as he charged at John. John met him head-on, parrying each spell with ease. Suddenly, Malfoy found himself ensnared by an unseen force, tumbling forward. He quickly recovered, rolling to adjust his position and firing another spell at John, which was intercepted by one of the conjured dogs. The distance between them closed rapidly until they were mere steps apart. Malfoy's eyes hardened, and he lunged forward, casting a spell and aiming a punch at John's face. John dodged and caught Malfoy's fist, simultaneously seizing his wand. Malfoy's wrist throbbed with pain, his wand flying from his grasp. Yet he persisted, launching a barrage of punches, only to be met by John's knee. His body doubled over in pain, and as he struggled to maintain balance, John's hand cradled the back of his head, sparing him from a harsh fall. Before Malfoy could utter a word of thanks, a fist connected with his face, causing his nose to bleed profusely. John's assault was relentless, leaving Malfoy battered and bruised. Finally, John eased Malfoy's head to the ground, sitting beside him. Feeling better? He asked, his voice deep and calm. After a moment of recovery, Malfoy wheezed. I'm weak, right? John retrieved a galleon from his bag, watching it vanish as Malfoy's injuries began to heal. If I were stronger, I could help you, Malfoy mused. I know, John replied. It's not just you. Cedric and others are all trying in their own ways. The conversation revealed a shared understanding, hinting at deeper alliances and the complexities of their relationships within the magical world. Percy was skilled, and Cedric had his own strengths, but Draco Malfoy felt he fell short in comparison. When my mother returned that day, I was confined to my room. Whatever you told her, I know you didn't harm me. Draco's voice was tinged with frustration. I'm too weak. Even if I had been there, I couldn't have changed the outcome. But I don't want to be just a recipient of help, John. Despite the healing injuries on his face, bruises still marred his features. Struggling to rise, Malfoy's determination was clear. I want to make a difference. I'm a part of the Star Club. John understood Draco's motivations. He knew why Draco was pushing himself so hard, why he was so desperate to prove his worth. Draco Sau, to be part of John's plans, craving vengeance. Gone was the petulant child who would cry for his father's intervention. Draco had matured. He yearned to stand on equal footing with Harry Potter, to show the world he was capable of achieving what Harry could. He was willing to risk his life for the cause. "I'm not a coward, John," Draco insisted, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. "I'm a warrior ready to fight. Don't dismiss me as a mere child. I want my revenge." As Draco's outburst faded, John, who had been silently listening, finally spoke, cleaning the blood from his hands. "Draco, I've never seen you as a child." Draco's eyes, filled with hope and uncertainty, met John's. "Does that mean I can be part of your plan?" John's response was tinged with exasperation. "I never excluded you, but watching you mimic those Gryffindor antics was irritating. Slytherin doesn't need that kind of heroism." Draco felt a wave of embarrassment for his earlier display of emotion. It seemed John had seen through his attempt to emulate Harry, drawing an unintended parallel between them. As October gave way to November, Hogwarts was enveloped in a chill that seeped into every corner. The Quidditch season arrived amidst the cold, bringing with it the traditional rivalry and camaraderie. During a match, John observed Luna Lovegood, torn between supporting Gryffindor, where her friends Harry and Ron played, and Slytherin, represented by John. Eventually, deciding to support both, she combined symbols of the two houses in her attire. John, meanwhile, was amusing himself with a horned snorkack, attempting to feed it a concoction of his own making. Despite the creature's initial reluctance, it eventually succumbed to John's threat of abandonment and drank the liquid, only to become inebriated and comically bump into a table. Draco, having learned the hard way that individual heroics were not the Slytherin way, watched the scene unfold with a mix of confusion and curiosity. "It must be a drunkard," John remarked casually, as Draco poked the creature and recoiled from its sharp horn. "What?" Draco asked, puzzled by the concept of a creature getting drunk. John's cryptic response left Draco wondering if this was another of John's unconventional ideas, a reminder of the unique dynamics within their group and the unconventional paths they were willing to explore in their quest for revenge and self-discovery. John presented the horned snoring beast to Luna, noticing she was still undecided. With a light chuckle, he offered some advice. "If you're seeking friendship, Gryffindor might be your choice. But if victory is your aim, then Slytherin is where you need to be." Luna pondered for a moment before selecting the lion emblem, Gryffindor. Her decision was influenced by her lack of acquaintances within the Slytherin Quidditch team. John was momentarily taken aback, silently chiding himself for his earlier suggestion. He watched as Luna, with a serene grace, adorned herself with the serpent emblem, which seemed almost too constrictive. Yet, her voice, light and ethereal, carried a profound truth. "This is also for the sake of friendship." At her words, a warmth spread through John's heart. He smiled, a genuine expression of contentment, and carefully set the horned snoring beast aside. Luna's choice, guided by her unique perspective, reminded him that the paths to friendship and victory were not as straightforward as the houses of Hogwarts might suggest. Chapter 305, Red Lion and Green Snake. For the first time since their third year, the fateful rivals Gryffindor and Slytherin faced each other on the Quidditch pitch. The clash was reminiscent of their founders' legendary opposition, symbolized by the stark contrast of red and green. Slytherin's team, led by Montague, showcased significant changes in their lineup, including a new captain and two first-time beaters, Goyle and Crabbe. Harry sought to comfort Ron, who was nervous about his role as the new Gryffindor keeper. The Slytherin beaters are also playing for the first time. They're probably just as nervous, maybe even more. They might even hit a bludger towards their own teammates by mistake, Harry joked, trying to lighten the mood. Despite the Gryffindor's jests, Goyle and Crabbe were indeed nervous, but felt a deep sense of honor representing Slytherin in this pivotal match. Malfoy, with his usual arrogance, instructed them to target Harry, emphasizing the importance of aiming for his head. As the teams emerged from their locker rooms, Malfoy's disdainful gaze met Harry's, and he mockingly gestured towards Ron, signaling his teammates to intimidate the new keeper. Ron, feeling provoked, struggled to maintain his composure, reminding himself to focus on the game rather than Slytherin's taunts. The Quidditch stadium buzzed with excitement as the match commenced. The crowd's cheers and chants filled the air, creating an electrifying atmosphere. The teams lined up, and after a tense handshake between the captains, Angelina Johnson and Montague, the game began. Harry noticed Professor Hilda, the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, in the stands alongside Professor McGonagall. Lee Jordan returned as the commentator, his commentary more subdued under the watchful eye of Professor Snape. At Madame Hooch's whistle, the players took to the sky. Angelina immediately reminded her team to be vigilant of Slytherin's scoring tactics. The match was intense from the start, with bludgers flying and players maneuvering skillfully to gain control of the quaffle. Angelina initially secured the quaffle for Gryffindor, but a well-aimed bludger from Crabbe disrupted her hold, allowing Montague to seize the opportunity. Slytherin's teamwork shone as Montague and Warrington executed a series of passes, slicing through Gryffindor's defense like sharp knives. A close call with a bludger forced Montague to dodge abruptly, nearly causing him to fall. Gryffindor's chasers quickly capitalized on the moment, but their triumph was short-lived as Warrington's aggressive play regained possession for Slytherin. The match continued with high stakes and fierce competition, showcasing the deep rivalry and the players' determination to lead their houses to victory. Amidst the chaos, George Weasley took aim, ready to make his move, demonstrating that in Quidditch, as in all conflicts between the Red Lions and Green Snakes, anything could happen. As Montague charged fiercely towards the goal, Ron was left alone to defend it. Riding the Light Wheel 2001 with unmatched speed, Montague threw the quaffle past Ron, scoring for Slytherin. Ron's face paled as Montague triumphantly raised his arm, marking the score. Throughout this time, Harry was consumed with worry for his friend and momentarily lost focus on the game. It took Angelina's roar to snap him back to reality, prompting him to resume his search for the snitch. Suddenly, Malfoy dove sharply, and Harry, driven by instinct, followed closely behind. Both wizards, mounted on their high-performance firebolts, resembled lightning bolts as they raced across the field. Despite his best efforts, Harry couldn't spot the elusive golden snitch, suspecting Malfoy might be obstructing his view. As they circled the pitch, Malfoy dove again with Harry in hot pursuit. The chase nearly ended in disaster, as they both plummeted towards the ground, with Malfoy executing a sharp pull-up at the last moment. Harry realized too late that he had fallen for Malfoy's feint, barely managing to lift his broom in time to avoid a crash, though not without grazing the ground and leaving behind marks. A bludger, sent flying by Crabbe, struck Harry's broom, causing him to momentarily lose control and veer dangerously close to the Ravenclaw stands. There, he caught a glimpse of Luna's oversized lion head hat and a scarf that resembled a real snake. Regaining control, Harry shot a glare at Crabbe, who responded with a mocking smile, while Goyle brandished his bat with arrogance. Slytherin scored 70-10, announced Lee Jordan, adding to Harry's frustration. Slytherin's aggressive strategy was evident as their chasers, Montague, Warrington, and Pusey, charged like a trident towards Gryffindor's goal. The Slytherin beaters focused on sending bludgers towards Harry, preventing the Weasley twins from intervening. Caught between dodging bludgers, keeping an eye on Malfoy, and searching for the snitch, Harry found himself overwhelmed. Slytherin scored again, 100-20. Lee Jordan's voice echoed with disappointment. Angelina, Gryffindor's captain, was powerless against Slytherin's tactics, which exploited their superior equipment. In the midst of this intense match, Malfoy called out to Harry and dove once more. Harry, wary of another feint, hesitated but soon spotted a glint of gold. Ignoring the potential trick, he chased after the snitch, with Malfoy leading the pursuit. The two were neck and neck, the snitch darting unpredictably as they both pushed their firebolts to the limit. Malfoy attempted to throw Harry off by leaning into him, causing a painful collision. Despite the lack of a referee's intervention, Harry remained focused on the snitch, which suddenly dipped lower. "Oh no, for God's sake," Slytherin scored, 120-. Lee Jordan's voice rang out, reminding Harry of the stakes. Determined not to repeat past mistakes, Harry accelerated, feeling the firebolt respond with increased speed. "The golden snitch is mine!" he declared inwardly, pushing himself and his broom to their limits in a final, desperate attempt to secure victory for Gryffindor. The tension was palpable as Harry felt the air around him heat up, a clear sign that the situation was about to escalate dramatically. With a determined growl, he accelerated, pushing himself to the limit. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of Malfoy, mirroring his actions with an outstretched hand, reaching for the same goal. Glancing down, Harry's attention was momentarily captured by the reflective badge adorning Malfoy's chest. It was this fleeting glimpse that sparked a flicker of recognition in Harry's eyes, igniting a surge of adrenaline that fueled his determination. The two were on a collision course, their rivalry reaching a new peak. As they closed in, the air crackled with the intensity of their focus. It was more than just a physical confrontation. It was a clash of wills, a battle of determination. Harry, fueled by a newfound resolve sparked by the sight of the badge, knew that he couldn't afford to lose. With every fiber of his being, he pushed forward, ready to face whatever outcome awaited them. Chapter 306. The loser is still the loser, and the winner is still the winner. The same movement, the same V-scratches. Angelina's roar reverberated across the Quidditch pitch. Defend! She knew that as long as they maintained their defense, victory was within reach. All her hopes were pinned on Harry. A bludger knocked Montague off his broom, and the quaffle was lost. The hearts of everyone in Gryffindor skipped a beat. The score was now 130-20. Victory was still possible if Harry could catch the snitch. The game was momentarily paused by Madame Hooch, who went to check on the fallen players. Malfoy was the first to stand, opening his clenched hands to reveal nothing. The Gryffindor stands erupted in cheers. Malfoy had missed the snitch once again. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Harry finally stood up. He clenched his right hand tightly, slowly opening it. The Weasley twins taunted Goyle and Crabbe, while Angelina thought of ways to praise Harry. However, when Harry's hand was fully opened, it was empty. Lee Jordan's voice, filled with surprise and confusion, echoed, "Empty?" Unexpectedly, Harry hadn't caught the snitch either. In the intense moment of their collision, both had missed the golden opportunity as the snitch slipped away from their fingertips. This means, some spectators realized belatedly, the game is not over yet, Lee Jordan exclaimed. The realization dawned on both teams. The match was still in play. Angelina's heart sank. Montague, rubbing his head, managed to stand up. Thankfully, he was resilient. Otherwise, that hit could have ended his playing days. After Madame Hooch confirmed they were both all right, she resumed the game. The competition intensified once again, but despite Angelina's best efforts to intercept, Gryffindor's score continued to fall behind due to Slytherin's overwhelming trident attack. In the end, Gryffindor was left powerless. Then, the golden snitch appeared once more. Harry and Malfoy resumed their chase, with Harry eventually catching the snitch in a rather ungraceful roll. However, this victory was bittersweet, as it did little more than narrow the gap. The final score was fixed at 2-40 to 190, with Gryffindor trailing by 50 points. The scene mirrored the World Cup, where Crumb salvaged the last shred of dignity for the Bulgarian team. Slytherin celebrated, while Gryffindor was disheartened. Harry, brushing off the grass and dirt, noticed Malfoy descending on his broomstick, a mocking expression on his face. "Potter, it's a pity you changed the goalkeeper. Compared to the previous one, Ron Weasley is like a sieve, isn't he?" Malfoy taunted, insulting Ron. Harry, infuriated, roared, "Shut up!" Malfoy continued mockingly, "If it weren't for his red uniform, I would have thought he was a Slytherin. I feel like I could write a song about his greatness." As Ron walked back to the locker room alone, Harry's anger intensified with Malfoy's continued taunts. "He always lets the ball in the goal. Bless us for winning this game," Malfoy sang, inventing a mocking tune. The other Gryffindor players, upon hearing Malfoy's song, glared at him. Malfoy, while singing, mimicked throwing motions, and Crabbe, having just landed, imitated Ron's desperate attempts to save goals. Slytherin's laughter filled the air. Harry, his eyes burning with rage, charged at Malfoy with a growl. The Weasley twins joined him. Although they teased their younger brother, they couldn't stand to see others humiliate him. Angelina attempted to intervene, but it was too late. Harry, closest to Malfoy, threw a punch, but Malfoy, grinning, dodged and yanked Harry by the sleeve, causing him to stagger and fall backwards. Malfoy then skillfully avoided the twins' combined attack, punching George in the face and kicking Fred in the stomach. Fred, in a moment of defiance, grabbed Malfoy's leg. Harry seized the moment to wrap his arms around Malfoy's waist, but Malfoy, in an attempt to extricate himself, kicked Fred in the shoulder with his left foot. His sweeping leg also caught Harry, who was a proke, hing from behind, sending him tumbling to the ground. Malfoy vented his frustration on Harry, still harboring resentment from a previous altercation with John. The Weasley twins attempted to intervene, but were quickly sidelined by Crabbe and Goyle, who charged in with the force of a rampaging boar and the strength of a bear, each dragging one twin away. When Madame Hooch arrived, wand in hand, to break up the fight, the faces of the three Gryffindors were a mess of bruises and cuts. Malfoy, too, sported a bleeding lip from a blow dealt by Harry. Crabbe and Goyle, grinning despite their nosebleeds, seemed unfazed by the altercation. "I've never witnessed such disgraceful behavior," Madame Hooch exclaimed, trembling with rage. "Return to the castle immediately and go straight to the headmaster's office." The spectators in the stands, buzzing with excitement, seemed eager to join the fray themselves. The combatants were forcibly escorted to the headmaster's office, with Malfoy, head held high despite his injuries, leading Crabbe and Goyle. Astoria, leaning on her sister, voiced her concern. "Will they be all right?" "Unless Snape has been bewitched with the Imperius curse," John replied with a chuckle. "They'll be fine." Indeed, Malfoy's prowess, honed through extensive training, was evident as he managed to fend off 3 attackers single-handedly. Harry's decision to punch Malfoy was questionable, especially considering the history of their confrontations near the Black Lake. As John had predicted, Professor Snape showed no inclination to punish Malfoy and his companions, recognizing that they were not the instigators. Crabbe and Goyle, wisely choosing to target the twins rather than engage in a brawl, managed to avoid direct confrontation. Despite their loss in the game, the Gryffindor trio's spirits were dampened further when Professor McGonagall, pale with fury, demanded they reflect on their actions. However, the situation worsened when Professor Umbridge, smirking with delight at the opportunity, suspended the 3 from the next Quidditch match. This decision, effective for as long as Umbridge remained at the school, devastated Angelina, the Quidditch captain, who now faced the daunting task of rebuilding half her team. The morale of the Gryffindor team plummeted. Angelina, frustrated with the trio's recklessness, exclaimed, "You're lucky you weren't completely overpowered by Slytherin." The 3, bruised and battered, had no concerns about their physical state. "I'm going to bed," Angelina declared, her voice hollow and her expression numb, as if hoping the day's events were merely a bad dream. "Angelina, wake up! You don't own a light yellow dress, nor is your hair fluffy," Ginny said, her voice tinged with concern for the captain's well-being. Alicia and Katie, the team's chasers, also worried about Angelina's mental state, hurried after her to offer comfort. Hermione, noticing Ron's absence, asked, "Have you seen Ron?" Harry shook his head. Ron had been taken to the headmaster's office. "I think he's avoiding us," Hermione said, her worry evident. Just then, Ron entered, his face pale and dotted with snowflakes, looking as if he wished to be invisible. "Where have you been?" Hermione asked, her concern for him clear. "Just taking a walk," Ron replied, his voice distant, still dazed from the day's events. "Come and sit by the fire. You look like you're freezing," Hermione urged, guiding him to the sofa where he slumped, defeated. "It's all my fault," Ron muttered, staring at his toes, unwilling to meet his friend's eyes. He blamed himself for their defense's shortcomings and their loss in the game. "I thought I could handle it on my own," he confessed. "I'm going to ask to leave the team first thing tomorrow morning." Harry, frustrated, retorted, "If you leave the team, we'll be down to just 3 players." Ron, taken aback, had not been aware of the aftermath of his departure. Hermione recounted the tale once more, leaving Ron utterly astonished. Meanwhile, Neville returned from the doorway, catching sight of the bewildered expressions on Harry and Ron's faces. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then hesitated. Ultimately, feeling compelled to offer some form of consolation, he said, "There's no shame in losing to Draco. He's quite skilled in combat. The last time we dueled, it took more than 10 minutes before I was defeated." Harry remained silent, his expression blank. Internally, he couldn't help but think, great, so I've been bested by someone considered barely a challenge by others. Chapter 307, Hagrid's Return and His New Armor. The atmosphere in Slytherin was starkly different from the gloom that had enveloped Gryffindor after their game loss and subsequent suspension. The common room was buzzing with excitement. With a flourish of John's wand, debris scattered across the floor moved to the walls, clearing a large space in the center. Another wave of his wand, and tables materialized out of thin air, each laden with an assortment of delicacies straight from the Hogwarts kitchens. They were celebrating their victory in style. Montague, taking a sip of his mulled wine, couldn't hide his astonishment. I really thought Harry Potter had caught the snitch for a moment there. Malfoy, ever the braggart, scoffed. Tactics, Montague. Do you even understand the concept of tactics? I let Potter believe he had a chance on purpose. It was all part of the plan. Montague raised an eyebrow, skeptical. If he hadn't been the captain himself, he might have been fooled by Malfoy's boast. He couldn't recall ever discussing such a tactic. Malfoy's pride in his own performance wasn't entirely misplaced, though. He had indeed managed to keep Harry at bay throughout the game, employing a feint that had tricked even the best of them. However, Montague knew that their so-called trident tactic, which relied heavily on superior equipment, wouldn't stand a chance in the professional leagues where everyone had access to firebolts. The conversation then turned to Ron Weasley, whose lack of self-confidence was palpable. It seemed Dumbledore's efforts to bolster the boy's self-esteem had fallen short. His performance in the game had suffered as a result. As the team continued to revel in their victory, John quietly exited the common room. He made his way to the kitchens to thank the house elves for their hard work. Winky, in particular, was overjoyed by the acknowledgement. After leaving the kitchens, John encountered Tom, who seemed to have learned to avoid unpleasant smells, and decided to take him along to visit Hagrid. On their way, they came across Filch, who was in the midst of disciplining some students. After a brief exchange, John continued on his way, leaving Filch to his duties. Arriving at Hagrid's hut, John noticed signs of the gamekeeper's recent return. The sight that greeted Harry, Ron, and Hermione, however, was far from welcoming. Hagrid was in a sorry state, with his hair matted with blood, a swollen and bruised eye, and various cuts and bruises marring his face and hands. The trio was shocked, staring at Hagrid as if he had just survived a battle with a giant. Despite his injuries, Hagrid attempted to reassure them, limping over to the stove to put on a kettle. It was then that Harry noticed an imposing set of armor, clearly made to fit Hagrid's massive frame. "What happened to you, Hagrid?" Harry asked, concern evident in his voice. "And what's this armor for?" Hagrid, trying to downplay his injuries, quickly changed the subject to the armor. "Oh, it's nothing to worry about. This here," he said, gesturing towards the armor with a hint of pride, "is a gift from John." His attempt to brush off his condition did little to ease their worries, but the mention of the armor piqued their curiosity. It was clear that Hagrid hadn't been back for long, and the story behind the armor and his injuries promised to be an interesting one. "A fairy craft," Ron observed, noting Hagrid's disheveled appearance with concern. "Hagrid, have you been attacked?" Despite his miserable state, Hagrid insisted he was fine. Hermione suggested a visit to Madame Pomfrey, but Hagrid was adamant about not going. It seemed he was concealing something as he pulled out a piece of dragon meat and applied it to his face, utilizing its analgesic properties. Though Hagrid remained tight-lipped, Hermione deduced the cause. "Did a giant hit you?" she asked. Hagrid dropped his hand, staring at Hermione in astonishment. "Giants? Who told you about giants?" he asked, his voice laced with panic. "We guessed," Hermione replied, with Harry and Ron nodding in agreement. It was a logical conclusion, considering Hagrid's size and strength. Only a giant could have inflicted such damage. "Are you seeking out the giants, Hagrid?" Harry inquired. Under their persistent questioning, Hagrid, as if he had ingested Veritaserum, divulged the entire story. He had indeed sought out the giants, on Dumbledore's orders, to win them over with a gift. Accompanied by Madame Maxime, he traversed mountains for a month to locate the giants, avoiding magic use to stay under the radar of both the public and the Death Eaters. Their journey was fraught with danger, and upon finding the giants, they encountered political turmoil that led to a change in leadership, making their mission even more perilous. Hagrid and Madame Maxime's efforts were ultimately unsuccessful, and they were forced to retreat. The tale was thrilling, yet it left Harry, Ron, and Hermione with lingering questions. If Hagrid hadn't fought the giant, how did he come to be in such a state? Hagrid insisted he wasn't attacked, which only deepened the mystery of his injuries. As they pondered this, a knock on the door startled them into hiding. Umbridge's arrival was unexpected, and outside, John and Tom took measures to conceal themselves, with John casting a disillusionment charm and Tom burrowing into the snow. Umbridge passed by, oblivious to their presence. John approached Hagrid's hut, overhearing a conversation about the upcoming inspection by Umbridge. Hermione was pleading with Hagrid to choose safer, more conventional creatures for his class, fearing Umbridge's scrutiny. Hagrid, however, was determined to showcase the more extraordinary creatures he had nurtured over the years, with John's assistance. John knocked on the door, causing a momentary silence before Hagrid, cautious yet hopeful, answered. Recognizing John, Hagrid's demeanor brightened. "John, I see the gift you gave me," he said, a smile in his voice. Inside, under the invisibility cloak, Hermione made a move to reveal herself, but Harry held her back, signaling for silence. He was curious about the exchange between John and Hagrid, viewing it as an opportunity for insight, perhaps even a form of retribution for a past overheard conversation. Upon seeing Hagrid, John's expression darkened, concern evident in his voice. "You were beaten?" he asked, his tone colder than the wind and snow outside, causing Ron to shiver. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees as John entered the hut. Hagrid, sensing the shift, hurriedly stammered, "No, I'm fine," in an attempt to dispel the tension. John, however, moved past the pleasantries without a word. He quickly noticed the absence of the three youngsters and deduced they were using the invisibility cloak. He didn't dwell on this realization, though his attention was soon captured by the sight of dragon meat, which Yaya was sneakily trying to pilfer. His expression darkened at the sight. The conversation between Hagrid and John soon turned to the topic of finding the giant. Hagrid, believing that since Harry and the others were already aware of the situation, saw no harm in informing John as well. However, this disclosure only seemed to worsen John's mood. His voice carried a dangerous edge as he asked, "You mean to tell me that Dumbledore merely instructed you to seek out the giant?" The gravity of John's tone suggested a brewing storm, one that hinted at the complexities and potential dangers of the task at hand. It was clear that John perceived the situation with a seriousness that Hagrid had perhaps underestimated. Chapter 308, Gaffe and Weakness. "Yes, I did say it," Hagrid, with his usual big-hearted nature, failed to detect the icy edge in John's tone. However, the subtlety wasn't lost on the three young friends. Ron, speaking in a hushed voice close to Harry's ear, whispered, "Why does he seem so angry?" Harry was equally puzzled, particularly struck by John's manner of addressing Dumbledore. Meanwhile, Hermione's anxiety grew. She too sensed John's growing dissatisfaction with Dumbledore. Hagrid, oblivious to the tension, invited John to sit and served him a cup of tea, boiling hot. Under the watchful eyes of the trio, the steam wafted from the cup. As Hagrid pushed it towards John, the tea cooled rapidly, a layer of frost forming on the cup's surface. "Is this all?" John's face was unreadable as he asked. "No other preparations?" "We brought presents," Hagrid began, only to be interrupted by John's sneer. "Just presents?" Hagrid, taken aback, wondered, "What else then?" John's voice deepened. "What about your safety?" "I'm safe," Hagrid retorted, but John was not convinced. "That's a giant, brutal, and bloodthirsty. Didn't Dumbledore provide you with any means of defense?" "We're all right," Hagrid muttered, though John's concern was palpable. "There are not only giants out there, but also Death Eaters," John pointed out coldly. Hagrid insisted on his safety, but John, visibly angered, pointed at Hagrid's face, highlighting his injury. "Dumbledore sent you on the most dangerous mission without a second thought for your safety." A dark shadow flickered in John's eyes as he spoke with ferocity. "Does Dumbledore consider everyone's life so trivial?" "John?" Hagrid couldn't believe what he was hearing. "How can you speak of Dumbledore in such a manner?" "You're my friend, Hagrid." John's voice was a snarl. "I won't stand by and let this happen to you." At that moment, The cup cracked, the tea inside freezing into solid ice. A dark aura emanated from John, leaving Hagrid bewildered and unsure of how to react. The trio was distressed, having never witnessed John lose his composure in such a manner. Hagrid's injury had clearly struck a nerve, igniting a fury in John that was hard to quell. The thought of Hagrid's perilous situation and Dumbledore's apparent indifference fueled his anger. "John," Hagrid attempted to reassure him amidst the tension that felt like an earthquake within the cabin. "I'm really all right, John." Hagrid's attempt at reassurance was akin to a large bear clumsily handling an embroidery needle. "Yes, Dumbledore, you remain oblivious," John muttered to himself. Harry, unable to contain his anger, retorted, "Dumbledore is not oblivious." Revealing themselves from under the invisibility cloak, the trio stood in solidarity. "Not oblivious?" John's response was icy. He sent Hagrid to negotiate with giants without any support. That's, Harry struggled to find a counter-argument. John's critique was relentless. Giants, known for their cruelty, were exiled for a reason. Yet Dumbledore sent Hagrid to them, armed with nothing but gifts. Harry, feeling cornered, watched as Hagrid stumbled over his words, trying to explain his injuries. Hermione, ever the peacemaker, tried to soothe John. Dumbledore wouldn't intentionally put Hagrid in harm's way. "I fail to see that," John sneered, his disdain for Dumbledore's actions clear. In his eyes, the well-being of others seems to hold no value. Harry, defending Dumbledore, glared at John. "Don't insult Dumbledore." The tension escalated as a dark aura enveloped John, his eyes momentarily shifting in a way that sent a chill down Harry's spine, reminiscent of a Dementor's presence. Harry felt a sudden pain in his scar. "Enough!" Hermione intervened, stepping between them. John closed his eyes and the dark aura receded, signaling a momentary end to the confrontation. The hut ceased its trembling, and John took a deep breath, regaining his composure. "I'll go to Dumbledore," he said softly, his gaze lingering on Hagrid for a moment. "Take care of yourself." With those words, he turned and exited the cabin. Harry, overwhelmed by pain, finally screamed and lost consciousness. John, without a backward glance, stepped outside. The Zou, sensing his presence, approached swiftly. "Keep all the animals away from here, and ensure Hagrid doesn't find out," John instructed the creature. His concern for Hagrid's well-being momentarily overtook him, especially considering Hagrid's penchant for dangerous creatures. He hoped to prevent Hagrid from encountering any more perilous animals upon his return. Meanwhile, Harry was rushed to the school infirmary, where Madame Pomfrey insisted he lie down. After nearly an hour of unconsciousness, Harry awoke to find Professor McGonagall by his side, inquiring about the incident. Hermione and Ron hesitated with their responses, but Harry managed to say, "I'm fine. I just fell off the bed and hit my head." Despite her skepticism, Professor McGonagall eventually left them to their recovery. Once discharged from the infirmary, the trio returned to the Gryffindor common room. Why was John so agitated about Hagrid? Ron pondered aloud, admitting his own fear at witnessing John's uncharacteristic fury. Harry, however, was preoccupied with the haunting eyes he had seen, reminiscent of his second year, and the subsequent pain in his scar. Could John be the cause? "It's because of Edgar," Hermione explained, her voice laden with sorrow. "Hagrid is his friend, and he was terrified at the thought of losing him." Despite Harry's dissatisfaction, Hermione criticized Dumbledore's decision-making, surprising both boys with her boldness. "Are you mad too?" Ron exclaimed, unable to comprehend Hermione's critique of Dumbledore. Yet, Hermione stood firm, highlighting the danger Dumbledore had placed Hagrid in by sending him to meet a murderous giant. The conversation left Ron and Harry in an awkward silence, pondering the risks Hagrid had faced, not only with giants but also with Death Eaters. The trio struggled with their feelings towards Dumbledore's actions, finding it hard to outright condemn him despite their concerns. That evening, Hermione sat alone in front of the fireplace, the warmth unable to dispel the chill of her thoughts. "John, what's the matter with you?" she murmured, seeking solace in the flames. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion, grappling with a dilemma that seemed insurmountable. In her solitude, her usual confidence waned, revealing a vulnerability she seldom showed. The next day, Hermione resumed her determined demeanor, setting out early to support Hagrid before his first class upon returning. She considered Hagrid a friend and was resolved to protect him from being dismissed by Umbridge. Meanwhile, Harry and Ron tackled their mounting homework. Upon arriving at Hagrid's hut, Hermione waited anxiously until Hagrid appeared, looking bewildered and carrying raw meat. "Hagrid, what's happened?" she asked, noticing the bruises that still marred his face. Hagrid, perplexed, shared that all the animals, including the Thestrals, had mysteriously vanished. He was at a loss, having expected to find them as usual. Chapter 309, Azkaban and Prison Break. John was seething with anger. When Daphne found him, he was sitting in solitude amidst a constellation of dimly lit stars. The room was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of starlight. If not for the golden liquid being poured into his cup, one might have overlooked his presence entirely. Daphne took a seat beside John, sensing the storm of emotions raging within him. "Thank you, Daphne," John murmured, finishing the wine in his glass with a heavy sigh. Words were unnecessary. Her silent companionship was all he needed to find a semblance of peace. Daphne observed John's increasingly gaunt face with concern. She couldn't pinpoint exactly when the change began, but it pained her to see him like this. Her eyes filled with distress, wishing she could alleviate some of his burden. To his surprise, she took the glass from his hand and drank from it. Then, in an unexpected turn of events, Daphne lost consciousness. John cradled the unconscious Daphne in his arms, lost in thought. He had overestimated her tolerance for alcohol. Realizing they couldn't stay at the Star Club any longer, especially with Daphne in this state, he decided to return to the Slytherin common room. Pansy, concerned about her best friend's whereabouts and the possibility of getting caught by Filch, paced anxiously in the common room. As the door opened, she began, "Daphne, where have you been? I was worried about you." Her words trailed off as she saw John carrying Daphne. Regretting her nosiness, Pansy was taken aback. However, John, seemingly pleased, requested, "Pansy, please take Daphne to the dormitory." After handing Daphne over to a stunned Pansy, John left with a sigh of relief. Pansy struggled to carry Daphne to the dormitory and gently placed her on the bed. Looking at her friend's flushed face, Pansy chastised herself for meddling. She dreaded Daphne's reaction upon discovering her involvement. Meanwhile, a newspaper detailing a shocking development spread rapidly throughout the school. It featured photographs of 10 individuals with a bold headline that read, "10 Azkaban prisoners escape." In the Great Hall, John set aside his bread to read the article. It reported a significant breach in Azkaban, with 10 prisoners managing to escape undetected. The article suggested collusion with the Dementors as the only plausible explanation for such an escape. John's expression turned contemplative. He had already been informed of the escape by a captured Death Eater from the American branch. Under the influence of Veritaserum, the Death Eater had revealed their secret escape plan. Voldemort intended for them to serve as a surprise force, using transfiguration to deceive the Dementors into believing the prisoners were still in Azkaban. However, their premature action against the American branch had inadvertently exposed their scheme. John realized that by sharing this information with Albus Dumbledore, he was arming him with crucial knowledge. The Dementors' secret alliance with Voldemort hinged on their ability to remain indispensable to the Ministry of Magic as Azkaban's guards. However, Dumbledore's awareness of their betrayal could potentially disrupt their plans. Dumbledore's hesitation to act immediately suggested he was waiting for an alternative to the Dementors. As the proprietor of the Silver Hand Johnny store, John understood the significance of finding a replacement for the Dementors. The unfolding events hinted at a deeper strategy, one that could change the balance of power in the wizarding world. The item in question had now made its way onto Old Batty's desk, signaling the emergence of a new entity to replace the Dementors. This raised a critical question. Is there any need for a Dementor that lacks loyalty to the Ministry of Magic? Clearly, the answer was a resounding no. The Daily Prophet's article served as a stark announcement to all that the Dementors' errors would lead to their downfall. John felt an intense gaze upon him and, turning, was met with the sight of a radiant and lively face. "Daphne?" he inquired, puzzled by her presence. Daphne, in response, shyly averted her gaze, leaving John in a state of confusion. He looked towards Malfoy for an explanation, only to find him equally perplexed. Since when had Daphne, known for her poise, become as bashful as a maiden? The transformation from a dignified young lady to a figure of endearing charm was unexpected, to say the least. Pansy, alone, understood the gravity of the situation. After escorting Daphne home the previous day, he had witnessed her in a vulnerable state, her actions akin to a confession of feelings. Believing she would forget by morning, Pansy had played along to comfort her. However, Daphne's demeanor the next day, radiating an aura of love, signaled that Pansy's predicament was far from simple. Daphne, sneaking another glance at John, sought reassurance from her best friend about her appearance, her face flushed with warmth. The memory of her boldness the night before left her heart racing, unsure of how to face John now. Astoria observed the exchange with a mix of amusement and curiosity, her gaze shifting between her sister and John, her expression practically spelling out the unfolding drama. Astoria, intrigued by her sister's newfound courage, was delighted, while Pansy silently pleaded for help, caught in a web of unintended consequences. The narrative shifts to Hagrid's first lesson of the 5th year, a day met with anticipation and a hint of apprehension among the students. Hagrid's reputation for introducing the extraordinary into his lessons had the students bracing for what was to come. As they speculated on the possible creatures Hagrid might present, the atmosphere was thick with a mix of excitement and fear. However, the lesson took an unexpected turn. Instead of the feared creatures, Hagrid introduced a simple yet educational task, distinguishing between hedgehogs. This choice, dictated by the circumstances in the Forbidden Forest, was a departure from his usual, more adventurous lessons. The students, particularly Harry, Ron, and Hermione, found relief in the simplicity of the task, a stark contrast to their initial fears. Umbridge, ever critical, viewed the lesson with disdain, her contempt for Hagrid's teaching methods evident. Despite her skepticism, the class proceeded without major incident, a small victory in the eyes of the students. As the lesson concluded, Harry's attention was suddenly captured, hinting at the unfolding of yet another chapter in their Hogwarts journey. Hagrid's voice boomed with excitement, piercing the quiet of the Forbidden Forest. "Look, look, everyone!" he exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder. A young Thestral was slowly approaching them, its presence causing a stir of excitement in Hagrid's heart. He had believed the Thestrals had vacated the depths of the forest, and seeing one now filled him with joy. Harry noticed something intriguing. Hagrid seemed to possess the ability to see the peculiar creature just as clearly as he could. It was a revelation that sparked curiosity in him, considering the known fact that Thestrals could only be seen by those who had witnessed death. Hagrid's eyes sparkled with an enthusiasm that was contagious. Freed from the monotony of a typical classroom setting, he couldn't contain his excitement. "Who else can see it?" he shouted, turning to the group with a broad grin. The question hung in the air, inviting the students to share in this rare moment of discovery. The presence of the Thestral not only offered a break from their usual lessons, but also presented an opportunity for a deeper understanding of the magical creatures that inhabited their world. Hagrid's passion for magical creatures was evident, and his excitement served as a reminder of the wonders that lay hidden within the magical world, waiting to be uncovered by those curious enough to look. Chapter 310, The Ministry of Magic and the Expulsion of Dementors. In the Ministry of Magic, Barty Crouch Sr. saw an opportunity amidst the chaos. The recent escape from Azkaban prison was his chance to make significant changes. When Tang Mi and his team, clad in white robes, arrived at the ministry, Crouch knew the moment had come. Tang Mi greeted him with a respectful bow and a smile. "Minister Crouch, the items you ordered from the ministry have been crafted. The team from the alchemy workshop is ready to install them for you." Crouch Sr. examined the ring-shaped device on the table, his expression serious. "Are you certain this will work?" "Please have faith in Johnny Silverhand's store," Tang Mi replied, his tone polite yet confident. "We never overpromise." Convinced by Tang Mi's assurance, Crouch Sr. allowed himself a rare smile as he picked up the ring. "I trust that Johnny Silverhand will meet our expectations." That day, the Ministry of Magic organized a press conference. Rita Skeeter, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet, penned a scathing editorial about Azkaban's security failures. The escapes of Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew had already cast doubt on the Dementors' effectiveness. The recent mass breakout was a stain on the Ministry's reputation, prompting Crouch Sr. to question the wisdom of stationing Dementors near Muggle areas. After months of investigation, a decision was made. The Dementors would be expelled from the Ministry of Magic for their negligence. This news was met with widespread approval among the wizarding community, though some expressed concerns about the historical and special role of Dementors within the Ministry. Crouch Sr., however, remained firm in his decision. Understanding the implications of Death Eater's escape, he led a team to Azkaban, with Pierce already making the necessary preparations. As they approached Azkaban, Pierce, dressed in polished leather shoes, proudly presented the Ministry's order. The Dementors, enraged by the announcement, were met with resistance. Pierce stepped aside, allowing the Aurors to handle the situation. A dozen Patronuses were conjured, driving the Dementors away. Tang Mi and his team from the Alchemy Workshop entered Azkaban, installing devices in every cell that acted as receivers. Whenever they encountered a Dementor, the security team was there to assist. The Dementors were eventually corralled into a cell and temporarily contained. The prisoners, previously controlled by neck-worn devices, saw an opportunity. One prisoner, seizing a wand from an alchemist, took a hostage with a menacing grin. Pierce's expression darkened, concerned for the safety of Johnny Silverhand's employees. "Don't come any closer or I'll kill him," the prisoner threatened. Tang Mi, however, remained composed. "Go ahead," he said calmly, his demeanor unflinching. The prisoner, taken aback by Tang Mi's response, grew desperate. "I mean it. Move, or I'll really do it." Pierce hesitated, worried about potential harm, but Tang Mi simply extended his hand, indicating the prisoner could proceed. The prisoner, realizing Tang Mi's resolve, panicked. In a last-ditch effort, he aimed the wand at the alchemist's head, shouting, "Break into pieces!" But before he could complete his threat, the situation took an unexpected turn. Calmly digging his ears, Pierce was taken aback. Had his spell failed to cast successfully? The prisoner attempted to shout again, but to no avail. An Auror standing behind him cast a stunning spell, knocking the prisoner to the ground. Tang Mi explained with composure. The magic circle absorbs the magical power within the body, constructs a transmission structure, and diverts the magical power away from the body. He pointed to the receivers that had been installed earlier and added with a smile, "Their magical power is absorbed into the magic furnace, which generates the energy supplement needed for the G series. In the future, the striker equipment can be recharged using the magical power transmitted from Azkaban." RC's eyes lit up at these words. The maintenance of striker equipment was a significant expense, and with the magic stove, they could save a considerable amount of money. It was essentially a cost-free achievement. With a smile, Pierce observed the prisoners of Azkaban being equipped with magic circles. Seizing the opportunity, Tang Mi presented a newly developed product, a pair of bracelets designed to temporarily restrain a wizard's magical power. As the two conversed, Azkaban underwent transformative changes. Upon his arrival, Old Barty was informed that all the prisoners had been fitted with magic loops. Understanding that these devices suppressed magical power and could supplement striker equipment, he shared Pierce's enthusiasm. Tang Mi also demonstrated another powerful feature, the Forbidden Realm. By running the magic furnace in reverse, an impenetrable field of anti-magic could be created around Azkaban, making escape virtually impossible unless the inhabitants' magical power was completely drained. Old Barty addressed the issue of the Dementors, stating, "Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand's request to take over the management of the Dementors as compensation for this endeavor seems somewhat disadvantageous." "Minister Crouch, my lord is always eager to assist his friends," Tang Mi replied with a smile. The Dementors, now deeply resentful towards the Ministry of Magic, were considered a problematic issue, especially since they were difficult to eliminate. Old Barty was reassured that Johnny Silverhand would not use the Dementors against the Ministry. Their alliance meant that any grudge held by the Dementors was also directed at Johnny Silverhand's establishment. Furthermore, the Dementors' previous secret alliance with Voldemort, coupled with Johnny Silverhand's stance against the Death Eaters, provided additional reassurance. The transaction was mutually beneficial. Tangmi concluded, "The business with Johnny Silverhand's store has concluded. As a gesture of friendship, my lord has a gift for Minister Crouch." Upon seeing Antonin Dolokhov, a Death Eater, being escorted by the security team, old Barty's face lit up with a pleased smile. The news of the Dementor's dismissal from Azkaban, along with the swift capture of Antonin Dolokhov among the 10 escaped prisoners, highlighted a stark contrast to the previous year's sluggish efforts. The Daily Prophet lauded Minister Barty Crouch as the most commendable minister in the past 2 decades. Even the Quibbler, known for its eccentric content, offered rare praise for old Barty, shifting focus from its usual conspiracy theories. John learned of these developments after his Magizoology class, feeling somewhat bemused by the appearance of the little Thestrals. A young Thestral approached him, showcasing its newly grown feathers. The little creature, driven by hunger, sought food in exchange for its presence. Hagrid also. Hagrid seized the opportunity to deliver another fascinating lesson before the class ended. Harry realized he wasn't losing his mind. Thestrals were indeed creatures visible only to those who had witnessed death. Hagrid referred to them as intriguing magical creatures. However, Professor Umbridge clearly disagreed. In the wizarding world, Thestrals were often seen as a bad omen, much like Dementors, and were not widely liked. Umbridge was scribbling furiously in her record book, her expression contorted into a grin that made her resemble a greedy, repulsive toad more than ever. For Hagrid, this lesson was a chance to share his passion for magical creatures, no matter how misunderstood they were. The rest of the students, however, could only stare in confusion as Hagrid enthusiastically described what was essentially thin air to them. Only a handful of students could actually see the Thestrals, leaving the rest to wonder at the sight of Hagrid apparently talking to and interacting with nothing. Chapter 311, The Purchase of a Dementor as a Counter to a Horcrux. In the principal's office, Dumbledore had the Daily Prophet spread out on his desk, a look of relief washing over his features. Despite old Barty's fear of him, he had heeded Dumbledore's advice. The decision to expel the Dementors from Azkaban significantly reduced the risk of Voldemort taking control of the prison. "It's not entirely good news," Snape remarked in a low voice, his concern evident. "The Death Eaters have escaped." "Some Death Eaters, Severus," Dumbledore corrected gently, setting aside the newspaper. Snape had brought him the news as soon as it broke, and Dumbledore understood his worries. With a wise glint in his eyes, he reassured, "It's not too late to rectify the situation." Dumbledore was more relieved that Barty Crouch was open to following advice from others than the actual decision to expel the Dementors. He had been concerned that Barty might disregard his counsel after Harry's interrogation by the Ministry of Magic. Thankfully, Barty proved himself to be more than a mediocre figure, much to Dumbledore's delight. The cooperation of the Ministry of Magic was crucial in combating Voldemort. With all due respect, Snape's expression remained grim. Barty Crouch's attitude towards you has already made his stance clear. As long as he contributes to the wizarding world, Dumbledore responded calmly, "I am willing to overlook the minor grievances." "I hope he appreciates your efforts," Snape remarked dryly. Dumbledore scanned the newspaper again, but found no mention of the Dementors. A flicker of doubt crossed his eyes, hidden behind half-moon glasses. Surely, the Ministry of Magic wouldn't simply expel the Dementors without a plan for their containment. At Azkaban, 10 Aurors stood guard outside a cell, their wands emitting a silver mist that trapped the Dementor within. "Tell them to come down and replace us," Pierce instructed, glancing at his pocket watch and signaling for the next team of Aurors to take over. Containing a Dementor was an arduous task, with the Patronus charm being the only known effective defense. However, mastering the Patronus charm was a challenge, even for Aurors, and not all were proficient. The continuous exertion of magical power was taxing, so Pierce had organized 3 teams of Aurors to rotate every hour. Thankfully, Dementors lacked the ability to pass through walls, which made their containment feasible. "Expecto Patronum," the new Auror intoned, stepping forward to cast the Patronus charm, relieving the previous team. After half an hour, one of the Aurors asked Pierce, "How much longer can we keep this up?" The operation had drawn nearly all the Ministry's aurors to Azkaban, risking chaos within the Ministry itself. Pierce turned to Tang Mi, who had just checked his watch and smiled. "I believe we're nearly done here," he said, hinting that their superior might soon dismiss them. Overjoyed, Pierce instructed the remaining aurors to evacuate. "Let's move out," he urged. "Someone else will handle this." Despite their superior's orders, the aurors hesitated, reluctant to leave the Dementor uncontained. But at Pierce's insistence, they deactivated their Patronus charms simultaneously. 3 seconds later, a terrifying cry echoed from the cell, sending shivers down the aurors' spines as they fled Azkaban. One young auror stumbled in his retreat, drained of magical power, and fell. The cell door burst open, and a swarm of Dementors surged out, converging on him like a dark tide. "No, please," he screamed, on the brink of being consumed by darkness, when suddenly, calm and measured footsteps approached. Unlike the frantic retreat of others, these steps moved steadily closer. The raging Dementor that had been advancing halted in its tracks, as if stopped by an unseen force. The young auror felt a surge of relief wash over him as the sound of footsteps approached. Glancing back, he was met with a sight that seemed straight out of a nightmare. The walls and ground behind him were covered in dense, black silk threads that spread like ink soaking into a canvas. The Dementors, those soul-sucking fiends, retreated as if facing their natural predator. Initially, the young auror feared he would be consumed by the encroaching darkness, but instead it bypassed him entirely, ensnaring the Dementor that could not escape. A single black thread tethered the creature, hastening its retreat. The footsteps halted behind the young auror, and a voice, low and hoarse like the sound of sand being swept away by the tide, commanded, "Leave here." Unable to hide his astonishment, the young auror turned to face the speaker and stuttered, Johnny Silverhand, Your Excellency." He was still catching his breath, the memory of his harrowing escape from Azkaban fresh in his mind. Even as he had crawled out of his cell, the fear lingered. Turning his gaze towards the source of the terrifying aura, he saw dozens of Dementors, which had previously required a significant effort from the aurors to contain, now caught in the black silk threads like a terrified child. John, known from his days at Hogwarts, held a box in his hand that seemed to act as a bottomless pit, drawing the Dementors into it one by one. Azkaban was being emptied of its dreaded inhabitants. The magic crystals embedded in the box glowed intensely, causing cracks to form on its surface. However, as the last Dementor was captured, John's silver arm turned black, enveloping the box and slowing the spread of the cracks. "This should hold until we get back," he remarked, holding the box securely as he exited Azkaban. The oppressive aura that had filled the air made even the most seasoned auror hold their breath. As John emerged, Pierce rushed to greet him with respect. "Lord Johnny Silverhand." John offered a slight nod, noticing Pierce's gaze fixed on his hand. With a chuckle, he said, "Tell Minister Crouch I'll take the reward." Pierce, momentarily taken aback, looked at the black box with a mix of awe and fear. "Your Excellency, allow me to escort you home," he offered, seeing John preparing to leave. John chuckled again. "No, I believe I have a faster way." "Faster?" Pierce looked puzzled, aware of the island's anti-apparition spells. He hadn't noticed any conventional means of arrival. Under his puzzled gaze, a massive figure descended from the sky. "It's a Zuwu!" Pierce exclaimed as the creature, resembling a large cat with a peony-like tail, landed and cleared the area with a sweep of its tail. John effortlessly mounted the Zuwu, which then activated its teleportation ability, disappearing into a spatial channel. Pierce was left marveling at Johnny Silverhand's mastery over such a rare magical creature. Meanwhile, Tang Mi, feeling somewhat abandoned, bid Pierce farewell without revealing his inner thoughts. The wizard known as Johnny Silverhand, the alchemist, departed Azkaban not in a carriage, but on the back of a magical beast, and did not return to Hogwarts. Upon reaching Silverhand Manor, the arrival of the Zuwu attracted the attention of the security team, which John quickly dismissed. He allowed the Zuwu to roam the lavender garden while he entered the manor, carrying the nearly shattered box. Walking through the manor with a calm demeanor, he approached a container shaped like a giant dragon. Slashing open his palm, John let his blood drip inside, causing the dragon's eyes to glow red. A door opened, revealing a room filled with what seemed like tangible darkness. This was the cell he had created, an unbreakable room surrounded by magic crystals forming a magnetic field. Tossing the black box inside, it shattered, releasing the captured Dementors into the containment area. The magic magnetic field was designed to hold them, a testament to John's ingenuity and power. The protective enchantments were activated, rendering the Dementors powerless to penetrate them. Simultaneously, the pervasive darkness in the room morphed into thick strands of black silk. Upon contact, a Dementor's body disintegrated, leaving behind a mass of pure soul that was swiftly absorbed. The Dementors, engulfed in panic, let out harrowing screams. John stepped out of the room just in time to witness a dragon expelling a soul into a designated container. Moments later, another soul followed. He had left behind the Soul Eater curse, a relentless force designed to continuously harvest the Dementors, transforming them into pure souls. John observed the process for a brief period before deciding to depart. However, just as he was about to leave, he paused, his gaze inadvertently falling upon the gold cup of the Horcrux, now trapped within the container. A mix of contemplation and surprise flickered in his eyes. The sight of the Horcrux, an object of dark magic, being ensnared in such a manner was unexpected. It sparked a series of thoughts in John's mind about the implications of his actions and the potential consequences they might entail. With a final, thoughtful glance at the trapped Horcrux, he turned and left the room, the weight of his discovery hanging heavily in the air. Chapter 312, The New Guardians of Azkaban and the Ministry's Dilemma. The decision to dismiss the Dementors from Azkaban had stirred a wave of controversy and concern. Many were skeptical about how the Ministry of Magic intended to address the resulting security gap. Those in the know understood the Ministry's predicament all too well. The Dementors, requiring no compensation for their services, had been an economical solution for overseeing the prisoners while simultaneously deterring potential misconduct. Their departure signified that Azkaban's vast confines would now necessitate human supervision, a daunting and costly endeavor that threatened to drain the Ministry's already strained resources. The Ministry of Magic, still recovering from the financial mismanagement rectified under Barty Crouch Sr.'s leadership, found itself in a precarious balance. With the Dementors gone, the immediate need to bolster Azkaban's security forces would inevitably lead to increased expenditures, a situation the Ministry could ill afford. The prospect of deploying Aurors to Azkaban was equally problematic, as it would deplete the Ministry's in-house resources. Amidst these concerns, the Ministry's employees reported to work with a sense of unease. Rumors of impending layoffs circulated, fueled by the belief that the financial strain of securing Azkaban would necessitate cuts elsewhere. The atmosphere was tense, with each department fearing the impact. However, Barty Crouch Sr., upon his arrival via the Flu Network, seemed unfazed by the whispers of worry. Informed that Albus Dumbledore awaited him, Crouch proceeded with a demeanor that commanded respect. Along the way, Percy Weasley approached him with inquiries about Azkaban's new security measures. Crouch reassured him, hinting at a solution that would address both the security and financial concerns without resorting to layoffs. In his meeting with Dumbledore, Crouch revealed that Johnny Silverhand would play a pivotal role in the new strategy for dealing with the Dementors' absence. Dumbledore, puzzled by the mention of Silverhand, was about to probe further when they were interrupted by the arrival of a reporter. The press conference that followed was anything but ordinary. Rita Skeeter, known for her incisive questioning, challenged Crouch on the wisdom of expelling the Dementors without a clear plan for Azkaban's future security. Crouch, however, remained composed, prepared to unveil a comprehensive strategy that would not only ensure the prison's safety, but also demonstrate the Ministry's capacity for innovative problem-solving. As the conference unfolded, it became clear that the Ministry of Magic, under Crouch's leadership, was taking bold steps to navigate the challenges ahead. The introduction of Johnny Silverhand as a key figure in the new security arrangement signaled a departure from traditional methods, promising a fresh approach to the long-standing issue of Azkaban's guardianship. Dressed in a formal wizard robe, the speaker addressed the audience with a grave tone. After thorough investigation, we've uncovered significant breaches involving Dementors, posing a severe threat to the safety of the magical world. To bolster Azkaban's defenses and safeguard our realm, we've made a decisive move. Please, place your trust in the Ministry of Magic, Old Barty responded earnestly. Thanks to the Ministry's relentless efforts, we've successfully neutralized the threat. We've upgraded Azkaban by introducing a novel device called the Magic Loop, which surpasses the Dementors in efficiency, he continued. This device not only restricts prisoners' use of magic, but also offers the Ministry substantial financial savings. Save money? Could you elaborate on that, Minister Crouch? Rita Skeeter inquired. Old Barty explained methodically, the maintenance of Auror and Enforcer gear incurs significant expenses. The magic power loop recycles absorbed magical energy, allowing for the self-sustenance of our equipment. This innovation significantly cuts down on maintenance costs. Concluding his statement, Old Barty smiled for the cameras. The Ministry of Magic extends its gratitude to Mr. Johnny Silverhand, whose generous sponsorship has considerably alleviated our financial burdens. This announcement marked a significant achievement, enhancing Old Barty's reputation and bolstering Auror Chief of Staff Pierce's political career. Ministry employees, previously anxious about potential layoffs, now found a reason to be thankful to Pierce and Old Barty for securing the sponsorship. The press conference also revealed Johnny Silverhand's role as a Ministry of Magic advisor, a position whose exact powers remained unclear. However, rumors suggested Silverhand's involvement in a Wengamot trial, hinting at the significant influence of a Ministry advisor. The Daily Prophet dedicated nearly a full page to the Ministry's successful overhaul of Azkaban and Minister Crouch's commendable leadership, with Barty Sr.'s smiling image featured prominently. The Ministry's decision to remove the Dementors, following Dumbledore's advice, is indeed good news, Hermione commented cheerfully at the Gryffindor table the next day. Harry had to acknowledge the minister's receptiveness. He had overheard a conversation between Dumbledore, Old Barty, and Amelia in the school hospital, discussing the Dementors' potential allegiance to Voldemort. Despite initial resistance, Old Barty's recent actions demonstrated a willingness to heed advice. He's also captured one of the escaped Death Eaters, Hermione added, her eyes sparkling with optimism. Yeah, but there are still 9 more out there, Ron interjected, his tone less enthusiastic. Who knows when he'll manage to catch them? Ron speculated that Old Barty's success might have been a stroke of luck, reflecting the mixed feelings among the students about the Ministry's effectiveness in handling the remaining threats. Honestly, he's been the best minister we've had in 20 years, Hermione remarked with a casual air, confident in her assessment. He'll be apprehended soon enough. You're blindly devoted, Ron countered, bringing up a sore point between them. It's just like your adoration for Lockhart. Hermione's glare at Ron was fierce, frustration evident in her eyes. Why did he always insist on dredging up memories best left forgotten? In a fit of irritation, she grabbed the Guide to Defense Against the Dark Arts from the table and hurled it at Ron. Ron yelped as the book struck him, but not before shoveling another spoonful of oatmeal into his mouth. Noticing Harry's unusual silence, Hermione turned her attention to him. "What's the matter with you, Harry?" she inquired, concern lacing her voice. Harry, who had been so lost in thought that he hadn't noticed his bacon slipping from his fork, snapped back to reality at Hermione's voice. After a moment's hesitation, he admitted, "I've been having dreams." The conversation shifted as Hermione and Ron's expressions turned from annoyance and pain to concern, their previous squabble momentarily forgotten. They leaned in, ready to offer their friends support, understanding that in their world, dreams could be far more than mere figments of the imagination. Chapter 313, Dream and Dream. Harry found himself ensnared in a dream once more, but this time, the narrative of his subconscious took an unexpected turn. Initially, he was drawn towards a door that remained perpetually out of reach, no matter how hard he tried to approach it. However, the scene abruptly shifted as he neared the door, transporting him to an unfamiliar and bizarre location. He found himself perched upon a table in a room adorned with a majestic dragon sculpture and enigmatic words floating in the air. At first, Harry dismissed it as just another ordinary dream until a figure he recognized entered his vision. It was a man he could never forget, one he had seen in the courtroom, hidden behind a lofty silver mask, Johnny Silverhand. Harry watched, intrigued and bewildered, as Johnny performed a peculiar ritual. Opening his palm, Johnny allowed blood to drip from his hand, which the dragon sculpture eagerly consumed. Its eyes glowed a sinister red as a hidden chamber opened behind it. The atmosphere within was suffocating, filled with a despair so thick it seemed to promise that happiness could never again find a home there. A chilling dread emanated from the chamber, enveloping Harry in fear. Trapped within what felt like a glass cover, Harry was forced into a fetal position, unable to stretch or move freely. He fought desperately to awaken from this nightmare, but his efforts were in vain. When Johnny emerged from the room, the air was pierced by screams so harrowing they seemed to target the soul itself. Harry's head throbbed with unbearable pain, and he feared his skull might shatter if the screams persisted any longer. Fortunately, the door closed, silencing the dreadful noise. As Johnny prepared to leave, he paused and turned, locking eyes with Harry. In that moment, Harry was certain he saw a flicker of doubt in Johnny's gaze. Those eyes then morphed into vertical slits, sending a wave of terror over Harry. The scar on his forehead seared with pain, jolting him awake. He sat up abruptly, his body slick with sweat. "What's the matter?" Ron mumbled groggily, half asleep. "It's okay," Harry replied, his voice shaky as he peered out into the dim morning light. Ron's snoring soon resumed, offering Harry an unexpected sense of comfort. Standing by the window, Harry took deep breaths, trying to shake off the remnants of the nightmare. His reflection in the glass revealed a pale, haunted face. Suddenly, his pupils transformed into vertical slits, mirroring the eyes from his dream. Startled, he rubbed his eyes and upon looking again, found them return to normal. The terror of that moment lingered until dawn broke fully. Later, in the auditorium, Ron and Hermione expressed their concern after hearing about Harry's dream. "I think we should tell Professor Dumbledore about this," Hermione suggested, worried. Harry, however, was reluctant. "No, he's been avoiding me," he said, his frustration evident. Hermione was anxious, unable to understand why Harry wouldn't heed their advice. As the day progressed, the dream was momentarily set aside. At the end of their lessons, John ventured into the Forbidden Forest. He had come to thank Zowu, a creature that had aided him in a recent endeavor. After feeding Zowu and expressing his gratitude, John watched as the creature played happily in the snow, alongside Tom, who struggled amusingly with a furball larger than himself. Content, Zowu eventually retreated back into the depths of the Forbidden Forest, leaving John to ponder the mysterious and unsettling dream that had plagued his friend Harry. In the forest, John was alerted by the sound of galloping. He furrowed his brow, puzzled, as the centaurs typically harbored no ill will towards Zowu. Even when tasked with driving animals away from the Forbidden Forest, they had never targeted the centaurs. Among the centaurs dashing past, he recognized Firenze. "What's stirring in the Forbidden Forest?" John mused, watching the centaurs disappear into the dense woods with a growing suspicion. Deciding to leave the mystery of the centaurs for another time, John returned to Hagrid's hut. With a flick of his wand, he summoned raw meat to feed the Thestrals, ensuring they were well cared for. An hour later, as he was finishing up, Hagrid emerged, looking as though he had just battled his way out of the Forbidden Forest, his face smeared with blood. John's gaze fixed on Hagrid, the crunching sound of Thestrals feasting on meat momentarily forgotten as Hagrid noticed John's presence. "John," Hagrid began, hastily trying to conceal his injuries, "what brings you here at this hour?" "I was feeding the Thestrals, Hagrid," John replied, his concern evident. "You're injured again, aren't you?" No, Hagrid stammered, a poor attempt at deception. "Just took a little tumble in the Forbidden Forest is all." John wasn't convinced. Hagrid's resilience was legendary. A mere fall wouldn't harm him so. "I respect you, Hagrid," John said solemnly, "and I won't pry, but please, promise me, you'll stay out of trouble." "I promise," Hagrid assured him quickly, eager to alleviate John's worries, aware of the young wizard's capabilities. After bidding Hagrid farewell, John headed to the Star Club for a pre-arranged meeting. Upon arrival, he found his contact already there, perusing the cabinets filled with celestial treasures. "The one on the left," John directed, and a chair scuttled over to him as if alive. The cabinet revealed bottles aglow with golden light, far more than John remembered leaving behind. Opening one, they poured the golden liquid into cups that appeared as if by magic, the rich aroma filling the air. "You've been busy," remarked Percy, his face illuminated by the golden light, looking more mature and less like the schoolboy John remembered. "It's been productive," John agreed with a chuckle. Percy, taking a sip of the starry beverage, couldn't help but express his admiration for Minister Crouch's achievements, comparing them favorably to his predecessor, Fudge. The conversation shifted to Dumbledore's recent visit to Minister Crouch, discussing the Dementors. "Dumbledore is aware of my involvement with the Dementors?" John mused, swirling the golden liquid in his glass, unfazed. "He's trying to discern your intentions," Percy confided. "My father and Dumbledore are both concerned, yet they believe you wouldn't allow the Dementors to align with Voldemort again." Percy's use of Voldemort's name was deliberate, a sign of the seriousness of their conversation. He shared how Dumbledore had reassured his father, despite the underlying concerns about John's plans for the Dementors. "If your father knew the full extent," John hinted at the sensitive nature of their discussion, "he might view you differently." Percy fell silent, contemplating, then looked up with determination. "I want to make a difference within the Ministry of Magic." "That's a perilous path," John cautioned, pausing to take a sip of his drink. "You're still within the Ministry's ranks." "My father serves the Ministry too," Percy countered, "yet he supports Dumbledore's cause." "All right," John conceded, nodding in agreement. "You've made your point. There is something I'm curious about, the Order of the Phoenix." Percy's eyes held a depth of concern as he spoke in a low, earnest tone. "If it's possible, I'd really like to understand more about what's troubling me, without causing any harm to my family relationships." "I'll do my best to help," John assured him. "In fact, I believe your brothers might have some insights into the matter." Percy let out a sigh, a hint of resignation in his voice. "Unfortunately, they're not exactly fond of me." John couldn't help but shake his head at the thought of the Weasley twins' relationship with Percy. "You have different ambitions, and it's natural that people with divergent paths find it challenging to coexist harmoniously." The Weasley twins were akin to a pair of lively magpies, always chattering and flocking to the center of excitement. Their disdain for Percy's adherence to rules and conventions was palpable. As for Ron Weasley, John sensed that his aversion to Percy stemmed more from his own insecurities. Percy's achievements only served to highlight Ron's perceived mediocrity, fostering a sense of inequality between them. Percy made his departure through the Star's fireplace, a part of a flue network that operated independently of the Ministry of Magic. Stepping into the blue flames, he vanished from sight. John's gaze drifted upwards to the dome above, where stars twinkled like distant beacons. "The situation is becoming increasingly complex," John mused, with more and more individuals getting drawn into the fray. Chapter 314, Prophecy and Nightmare. In the depths of December, snow blanketed the world in white, accumulating thickly on the branches of trees. Beneath one such tree, Tom lay asleep, his legs comically up in the air and his tongue lolling out. Not far from him, Yaya mirrored his posture, tongue also out. Suddenly, the weight of the snow caused the treetop branches to give way, showering the two dogs in a cascade of snow. Startled, Tom scrambled to the side, unearthing a music box buried beneath the snow. With a decisive slap of his paw, he stopped the music box from playing. Yaya shook the snow from his mouth, his eyes filled with confusion and doubt. Tom, music box now securely in his mouth, raised his tail proudly, as if to say, "Young dogs these days just can't handle a bit of snow." With a shake of his head, he flung the snowflakes away, and the two dogs took off, running around the edge of the forbidden forest. Perched on a tree, Basil, who had inadvertently caused the snowfall, watched them with a look of disdain. From a nearby snowdrift, a platinum-blonde head emerged. Draco Malfoy, shivering from the cold, found John and complained, "Can you please stop letting Tom run around with that music box? I nearly froze to death out here." John glanced at Malfoy, who was now trying to warm himself with mulled wine, and immediately understood the situation. Tom had taken a liking to the black magic music box, using it as a sleep aid. Unfortunately, its lullaby had put Malfoy, who had been training nearby, into an unintended deep sleep. If not for the heavy snow awakening Tom, Malfoy might have spent the entire night outside. "If you can convince Tom, I'd be more than happy to agree," John replied with a smile. Malfoy's expression darkened, knowing all too well that Tom wouldn't listen to him. Looking out the window, John remarked, "We've had a lot of snow this year." "I'm not going home for Christmas," Malfoy declared, the thought of witnessing his father colluding with Voldemort more unbearable than any physical discomfort. Neville approached, carrying a pot of mulled wine. "Draco, do you want some?" "Did you bring that pot straight from the kitchen?" Malfoy exclaimed, his nose wrinkling at the scent. "What's that awful smell?" Neville, his nose blocked by a tissue, replied, "It's Daphne's creation, hot pineapple wine." "Pineapple wine?" Both Malfoy and John were perplexed. Curious, Malfoy leaned in for a closer sniff, only to be met with a pungent, sour aroma that made his legs buckle, sending him to the ground. As he got up, he pleaded, "Take it away, quickly!" Before he could finish, Daphne arrived, spoon in hand, eager to share her concoction. "John, let's escape," Malfoy whispered, reaching out for John's hand, only to find John looking back at him with an apologetic expression. "Forgive me, Draco," John said guiltily. Malfoy felt a chill spread through his body, freezing him to the spot. John then stood up and announced, "No, Draco's passed out from the cold. He needs a hot drink." Daphne rushed over, exclaiming, "I have hot pineapple wine ready." "That's perfect," John agreed as Neville watched with a grimace. Daphne began pouring the hot pineapple wine into Malfoy's mouth, who initially struggled, but eventually succumbed to numbness. John made a sign of the cross over Malfoy and said solemnly, "You are a great friend, Draco." Cedric, initially confused by the scene, soon joined in the peculiar ritual of feeding Malfoy the wine. The pot was quickly emptied, and when Malfoy finally thawed from his frozen state, his first instinct was to confront John, only to be bested once again. Sitting in defeat, Malfoy pondered the meaning of life. "I'm not going back for Christmas either," Cedric announced, pushing the pot aside. He added, "I have plans with Chew." "Have you two made up?" Daphne inquired. Cedric smiled and nodded. "I've been neglecting her for a while. It's time to make amends." John had plans to take Chew to Hogsmeade during his free time. He mentioned, with a hint of resignation, that Chew sometimes felt jealous, and he believed it was important to provide her with a sense of security. Upon hearing his plans to visit Lady Putafoot's tea house, a known romantic spot, Daphne couldn't hide her curiosity and excitement. However, when John inquired if Daphne wouldn't be returning home, she nonchalantly mentioned her parents were away on a trip. Astoria, overhearing the conversation, expressed confusion about their parents' sudden travel plans. But Daphne quickly silenced her with a smile that was both threatening and gentle, insisting they were indeed off to Finland and taking Astoria with them. A week before Christmas, John found himself in the Shrieking Shack, engrossed in the mysterious eye card and a crystal ball. As he interacted with the card, it ignited, the flames eventually consuming it, leaving John with a look of mild shock as he noticed the burns on his fingers. The crystal ball emitted a fluorescent glow, captivating John before he decisively pocketed it and left the shack. Meanwhile, Harry was trapped in a horrifying nightmare. He found himself in a dark corner, fixated on a man sitting on the ground. Driven by a bloodthirsty urge, Harry approached the man, struggling to control his violent impulses. Despite his efforts to restrain himself, the man awoke, forcing Harry into action. He attacked the man viciously, his sharp teeth easily breaking skin and bone. Just as Harry was about to deliver the final blow, he felt his consciousness being pulled away to a different scene, where he was confronted by a silver mask and felt his soul being tugged at by black silk threads. The pain in his scar was excruciating, pulling him back to reality. "Harry! Harry!" Ron's urgent voice snapped Harry out of the nightmare. He awoke drenched in sweat, the pain in his scar unbearable. Ron, looking terrified, stood by his bed with several other figures nearby. Overwhelmed by the pain, Harry vomited, the memory of the bitten man vivid in his mind. Gasping for air, he managed to tell Ron, "Your dad. Something happened to your dad. He was bitten. It was serious. There was blood everywhere." Ron, confused and skeptical, tried to calm Harry, suggesting it was just a nightmare. But Harry, frantic and insistent, claimed, "No, it's not a dream. I was there. I saw it. I did it. His wild demeanor convinced Ron that Harry was unwell, but Harry's struggle was so intense that Ron couldn't restrain him. Neville stepped in, witnessing the chaos unfold as the room plunged into a state of alarm and confusion. Harry struggled against the grip of his assailant, but the force was too strong, pinning him down with an unyielding hold. In a stroke of luck, his roommate, who had just stepped out, returned at the crucial moment and, realizing the gravity of the situation, rushed to find Professor McGonagall. Unlike Ron, who might have hesitated or questioned further, Professor McGonagall wasted no time upon hearing the account of the incident. She immediately understood the severity of the situation and knew that it required the attention of someone with more authority and wisdom. Without a moment's delay, she escorted Harry to seek out Professor Dumbledore. The urgency of their mission was palpable as they navigated the corridors of Hogwarts, the silence between them heavy with unspoken worry. Professor McGonagall, known for her stern demeanor and strict adherence to the rules, showed a different side in that moment. Her quick decision to bring Harry directly to Dumbledore spoke volumes of her concern for his well-being and her trust in Dumbledore's judgment. As they approached Dumbledore's office, the gravity of the situation settled in. Harry, still shaken from the encounter, found a sense of solace in the fact that he was not alone. Professor McGonagall's decisive action and the imminent counsel of Dumbledore provided a glimmer of hope in an otherwise dire situation. Chapter 315, Father and Son. As soon as Dumbledore saw Harry, he began to inquire about what had happened. Upon learning that Harry had witnessed Arthur Weasley's attack, he quickly made arrangements for the painting in his office, which also had a counterpart in the Ministry of Magic, to be utilized for communication. Meanwhile, Dumbledore was far from idle. He placed a delicate silver instrument on his desk, and after sitting down opposite Harry, tapped it lightly with his wand. The instrument sprang to life, emitting a rhythmic jingle and releasing wisps of pale green smoke from a small silver tube at its top. Dumbledore watched intently, his brow furrowed in concentration as the smoke coalesced and twisted in the air. Within seconds, the smoke thickened and formed the shape of a snake's head, its mouth agape. Naturally, Dumbledore murmured to himself, but essentially separate? Harry was puzzled by Dumbledore's words. Before his eyes, the smoke snake split into two. Dumbledore observed the transformation with a mix of grim satisfaction and concern, then ended the experiment. As he looked up, the two smoke snakes had become three. He watched them until the portraits dispatched to the Ministry of Magic returned with news. Dumbledore, panted Evra, a former headmaster of Hogwarts, upon his return. What news? Dumbledore asked without delay. I shouted until someone finally came running, the wizard in the portrait explained, mopping his brow with a curtain. I told them there was trouble below, and they were skeptical at first. Then his son arrived, carrying him up, covered in blood. His son? Harry echoed, puzzled. It's Percy. He was at the ministry, Dumbledore clarified. Yes, his son saved him. They have the same red hair. He was rushed to St. Mungo's just in time. A moment later would have been too late. The portrait added. Ron, who had been listening anxiously, finally felt a wave of relief wash over him. Dumbledore thanked the portrait and then turned to Professor McGonagall. Minerva, please wake the other Weasley children. Of course, Professor McGonagall replied, standing and swiftly making her way to the door. Harry glanced at Ron, who now looked both scared and worried. Percy saved your father, Harry whispered. Yeah, Ron replied, his voice tinged with confusion. I never liked him working at the ministry. At the Ministry of Magic, Percy Weasley was known for his dedication to his work. With the ministry in the process of being rebuilt and Percy recently appointed as a director, he was swamped with cases. Passing by his father's office, he decided to check in, prompted by a comment from John. After waiting without response, Percy entered the office, only to find his father in a dire state. A large emerald snake was poised to attack. Without hesitation, Percy drew his wand and cast a stupefying spell, interrupting the snake's advance. Despite his efforts, the snake proved to be unusual, capable of deflecting spells. Percy, driven by a mix of fear and anger, continued to cast spells, pushing the snake away from his father. Eventually, sensing defeat, The snake gave Percy a lingering look before vanishing into the darkness. "Dad!" Percy rushed to his father's side, checking his injuries before sending him to the hospital. Outside the hospital, Percy sat, his hands trembling uncontrollably, running his fingers through his hair. "Family," he muttered to himself, realizing for the first time the overwhelming power of emotion when a loved one is in danger. This revelation made him understand why John had been reluctant to involve him in certain matters. Percy was a member of the Stars Club, while his family was aligned with the Order of the Phoenix. He now understood that in times of crisis, allegiances mattered little. The safety of one's family was paramount. Thanks to Percy's timely intervention, Mr. Weasley's life was saved, and he was out of immediate danger. He sat beside the hospital bed, his gaze alternating between the ceiling and the floor, sharing a heavy silence with Mr. Weasley. Breaking the quiet, Mr. Weasley said, "Thank you. I thought you'd have left immediately." His voice carried a hint of embarrassment. Months ago, he and Percy had clashed over Percy's fixation with the Society of Stars, which Mr. Weasley deemed immature. He had hoped Percy would instead lend his efforts to the Order of the Phoenix. But now, after Percy had bravely fought off a snake to save him, Mr. Weasley saw the strength in his son. He realized Percy was no longer the child he once felt compelled to protect. "I wanted to talk to you," Percy began, picking at the dried blood on his clothes. "Did Dumbledore send you there? To the Department of Mysteries?" "Sorry, Percy," Mr. Weasley sighed, a weight in his voice. "I can't disclose the reasons." "You almost died," Percy retorted, his anger rising. "Why were you even in the Department of Mysteries? It's not your responsibility. If Dumbledore wants something from there, he should retrieve it himself." Percy's voice grew louder, his frustration palpable. "Percy!" Mr. Weasley's voice was sharp, a clear command for silence. "Enough. We will not discuss Dumbledore in this manner." Percy, teeth clenched in frustration, stood abruptly. It was then that Molly Weasley's surprised voice came from the doorway. She embraced her son, tears of relief and pride streaming down her face. "You saved your father, Percy. You are my pride." The tension between father and son seemed to dissolve in that moment, giving way to a silent understanding. They offered comforting words to Molly, and soon Percy's gaze fell on his younger siblings and Harry, who had quietly entered the room. After a brief pause, he gently extricated himself from his mother's embrace. "I have matters to attend to at the Ministry of Magic. I must leave now, but I'll send you a Christmas present," he promised. Molly, tears of joy mingling with her smile, nodded in understanding. Percy walked past his siblings, not stopping, as Ron whispered to Harry about the argument he had sensed between Percy and their father. Harry nodded in acknowledgement, while Fred and George, curious about Mr. Weasley's bandages, were relieved to see him out of immediate danger. "Department of Mysteries?" John mused, pondering the message Percy had sent. It seemed Dumbledore and he shared a common goal. Placing the Horcrux gold cup back into its cover, John's thoughts were interrupted by the memory of Mr. Weasley's snake attack, which brought a sense of astonishment. Dismissing the thought that it could be Nagini, he wondered about the origin of this second snake. Its cunning escape into the darkness suggested an intelligence beyond that of ordinary snakes, indicating it was a deliberate challenge to the Order of the Phoenix. John surmised the intentions of both Voldemort and the Order regarding the Department of Mysteries. It was clear that whatever was housed there held great importance for Voldemort to devote so much effort to obtaining it. "Their conflict could be advantageous to me," John thought, his fingers idly playing with the ring as he stared at the Horcrux gold cup. The Horcrux's reaction, coupled with a previous sense of being watched, suggested Voldemort might be aware of his actions. Whether it was his attempt to extract the soul from the cup or another reason, John knew he needed to fortify its defenses. As the clock struck midnight, signaling the arrival of Christmas, John rose from the sofa and walked to the balcony of Silverhand Manor. A smile graced his face as he observed the security patrolling the grounds, a sense of anticipation in the air. Outside, they wished the security team a Merry Christmas. Observing the tranquil atmosphere, he whispered, "Merry Christmas." As he looked up, more than a dozen hippogriffs soared towards Nocturne Alley, each carrying a bundle of gifts. The sky was alight with fireworks, and the air was filled with cheerful singing, making this Christmas exceptionally vibrant and exciting. Chapter 316, Joy and Christmas Gifts. Dumbledore remained in the principal's office, his gaze fixed on the silver instrument with a look of complexity in his eyes. "That boy, if he wasn't lying, you should understand the implications," spoke Phineas Nigellus Black, the least popular headmaster in Hogwarts history. Snapping out of his thoughts, Dumbledore replied, "Are you referring to the third dream?" Harry had experienced 3 significant dreams. The first was a typical reflection of youthful exuberance, the second concerned Arthur Weasley's attack, but the third was peculiarly intense, as if Harry was caught between 2 competing visions. "You're aware of the man behind the silver mask," Phineas remarked with a hint of pride. "He is indeed a figure of considerable pride." "His involvement suggests a connection to that individual," Dumbledore mused, a spark of realization lighting up his eyes behind his half-moon glasses. "It's heartening to know he's still fighting for what's right, reminiscent of his actions in his second year." He referred to the diary destroyed by Harry and John, which still lay in a drawer, a relic of their bravery. Feeling it was time for a serious conversation, Dumbledore decided he needed to speak with John, not as Johnny Silverhand, but as John Wick. Upon returning to Hogwarts, John found his room overflowing with presents, a sight he had grown accustomed to. He began to sort through them. A bottle of women's perfume from Fleur, which puzzled him, a broomstick maintenance kit from Malfoy, a new bag from Cedric, accompanied by a women's version, hinting at an inside joke, a photograph from Astoria, capturing her and her family's hurried vacation in Finland, their expressions a mix of joy and sorrow, and a handmade pen from Daphne, reminiscent of one John had crafted earlier. As he opened each gift, John's brow furrowed in thought. "Didn't Uncle send anything?" he wondered aloud. It seemed his uncle had withheld gifts this year, perhaps awaiting John's acknowledgement of his heritage. His contemplation was interrupted by Malfoy knocking on the door, seeking to discuss their ongoing schemes. Goyle and Crabbe, too, had stayed over the holiday, bound by a mission that prevented their return home. Pansy appeared shortly after, her arrival rushed as if she was fleeing from someone, her boyfriend left behind in the castle over Christmas. The school felt unusually quiet this year, likely due to the Weasley family's absence. Emerging from the Black Lake, John felt the cold wind crystallize the moisture in his hair into frost. Despite his efforts, he failed to communicate with the giant octopus, leading him to speculate that it might be the spirit guardian of the Black Lake. Heading towards the Forbidden Forest, John pondered Hagrid's frequent absences. Hagrid always ventures into the Forbidden Forest, he thought, noting the gamekeeper's increased visits. Despite his curiosity, John respected Hagrid's request not to explore the forest further. After caring for the Zowu, John set off for Hogsmeade, intrigued by Daphne's sudden invitation to a tea-house there. At the castle gate, he was greeted by Daphne's smile, and they walked together to Hogsmeade. There, they encountered Cedric and Cho Chang, the couple exuding happiness as they strolled arm in arm. John noticed Daphne glancing at his hand, seemingly in contemplation. "Merry Christmas, John," greeted Neville, beaming with joy alongside his family. "We're spending Christmas in Hogsmeade this year," he shared, then leaned in to whisper, "Harry dreamt that Ron's father was attacked." Pausing, Neville added with hesitation, "Harry believes he was responsible for the attack on Ron's father." "I understand," John nodded, his understanding deepened by the influence of the Horcrux. As Voldemort's 7th Horcrux, Harry Potter was undeniably unique. Unlike the others, he wasn't under Voldemort's direct control, but was still subtly influenced by him. After a brief conversation with Neville, who then departed with his parents, John escorted an eager Daphne to the tea-house. Despite it being Christmas, the place was bustling with young couples. As they approached the entrance, John caught sight of Cedric and Cho Chang. Daphne, gathering her courage, reached out to hold John's hand. However, John's expression soon turned serious. "Daphne, I'm sorry, but I can't continue our shopping trip," he said, his attention captured by a black owl descending from the sky. Daphne's heart sank as she watched John retrieve a letter from the owl. Trying to hide her disappointment, she managed to smile and said, "It's okay, I was just happy to be here." John paused, then turned back to her. "For you, Merry Christmas," he said, handing her a gift from his bag. Daphne's disappointment was replaced by joy, and she watched John walk away, a sweet smile on her face, oblivious to the curious glances from Cedric and Cho. John's abrupt departure was driven by urgent news. The Death Eaters had made a move. It had been a while since their last attack on the American branch, and now they had surfaced in Nocturne Alley. The security team had identified them, despite the Death Eaters' apparent confusion with the modern-day Nocturne Alley, thinking it was still as it had been years ago. Upon arriving at the office via apparition, John was greeted by Tang Mi, who reported, "We've spotted traces of the Death Eaters. It seems they're after the gardener." "If Voldemort learns his loyal follower isn't dead," John remarked with a smirk, "it seems he's keen on a rescue mission." "How did the gardener react?" John inquired. Tang Mi pondered for a moment before responding. He didn't show any particular reaction. John had previously implanted a mental seed in Barty Crouch Jr., which had been growing steadily due to Voldemort's prolonged absence. The lack of reaction from Barty upon the Death Eater's appearance suggested the seed's influence. "Death Eaters operate in the shadows. We can create opportunities for them," John mused, aware that a daylight rescue was out of the question. The plan was to facilitate a covert transfer, a move John had been anticipating for some time. His primary concern was whether Voldemort would personally intervene, given Barty Crouch Jr., a significance not only as a valuable asset in combat, but also as leverage over Barty Crouch Sr., the increasingly powerful Minister of Magic. Double the reward for capturing a Death Eater, John decided, effectively increasing the bounty and calling upon his elite followers. This move was designed to counter Voldemort's potential involvement. If Voldemort hesitated, the mental seed within Barty would fully take root. John contemplated informing the Order of the Phoenix, but quickly dismissed the idea. The situation in Nocturne Alley, likely involving only a small number of Death Eaters, didn't warrant revealing his hand, especially given the ongoing conflict between the Order and the Death Eaters. Moreover, the rivalry between Johnny Silverhand and Dumbledore provided Voldemort with the freedom to operate. "I'm heading to the garden. Would you like to join me?" John asked Tang Mi, who glanced at the clock before replying with a stoic expression. "Is declining an option?" He had a prior engagement with Ozzy, indicating his reluctance to get involved further. As the clock ticked closer to the appointed time, his frustration grew. He harbored a deep-seated hatred for the Death Eaters, who seemed to have a knack for never arriving too early or too late, but always at the most inconvenient moment. He paced back and forth in the dimly lit room, the shadows casting eerie shapes on the walls. The tension in the air was palpable, a heavy weight that pressed down on his shoulders. He had prepared meticulously for this encounter, knowing full well the dangers that lay ahead. Yet as the minutes slipped by, his resolve began to waver, giving way to a simmering anger. "Why must they always test my patience?" he muttered under his breath, his voice barely more than a whisper. The Death Eaters, with their twisted loyalties and dark ambitions, were a constant thorn in his side. Their allegiance to darkness and chaos stood in stark contrast to his own quest for justice and peace. He checked the time once more, his eyes darting to the ancient clock that hung on the wall. Its hands moved steadily, indifferent to the turmoil that churned within him. He knew that time was a luxury he could ill afford to waste. Yet he also understood the importance of being prepared for whatever the Death Eaters might throw his way. As the final seconds ticked away, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation. The air seemed to grow colder, the shadows darker, as if the very atmosphere was bracing itself for the impending clash. And then, as if on cue, the silence was shattered by the sound of footsteps approaching. He tensed, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring, ready to unleash his fury on the intruders. The time for waiting was over. The battle was about to begin. With a determined glint in his eye, he stepped forward to meet his fate, ready to face the Death Eaters head-on. He knew the risks, but he also knew that the fight against darkness was one worth waging. And come what may, he was prepared to give it his all, for the sake of a better, brighter future. Chapter 317, Garden and Games. In the midst of Nocturne Alley, amidst the stark whiteness of winter, There lay a garden vibrant with the hues of countless flowers, a rare sight where blooms of every season thrived together. This garden, an anomaly in the otherwise bleak alley, was tended to by a solitary gardener whose name remained a mystery to all. His days were spent pruning and fertilizing, ensuring not a single snowflake marred the beauty of his charges. Despite the curiosity his presence inspired among the shop assistants nearby, his origins and identity remained as elusive as the changing seasons within his garden. His world was confined to this patch of color and life, his only abode a modest room within the garden's bounds. One day, as the gardener, known to some as Little Barty, reburied a bone that had surfaced, a figure approached him. This person, hidden behind a silver mask, stood out against the backdrop of delicate roses, a light smile playing on their lips. "You seem quite content with your work," the masked figure observed. Little Barty, however, remained focused on his task, picking up his shovel with the intention of leaving. But a single sentence halted him in his tracks. "Voldemort knows you're here." The mention of the name he revered as that of a father figure reignited a spark in his dormant heart. The silver-masked figure, John, moved closer, the garden seemingly parting ways for him. "Tonight, you might just regain your freedom," he teased, plucking a rose and admiring its beauty before turning his attention back to Barty. "Let's play a game," he proposed, the simplicity of the challenge masking the complexity of its implications. "What game?" Barty asked, his voice cold. "A simple wager. If you can leave this garden, I'll return your wand. If not—" John's voice trailed off as he placed the rose in Barty's breast pocket, the gesture seemingly benign, yet laden with meaning. "You'll have to acknowledge Barty Sr. as your father once more." The proposal ignited a fierce hatred in Barty's eyes, his refusal loud and clear. Yet John's provocations, questioning Voldemort's power and Barty's loyalty, eventually wore down his resolve. With a mix of anger and desperation, Barty accepted the shovel back from John, signifying his reluctant agreement to the game. As Barty stormed off, another figure, Tang Mi, emerged, stepping carelessly over the flowers. "What's our next move?" he inquired. "Weapons. Lots of them," John replied, his voice a low growl, the silver mask casting a shadow over his features. "Let the game begin." In the world of magic, the title of the foremost arms producer had shifted dramatically over the years. Gone were the days when names like Ollivander were the go-to for wands. Now, the name on everyone's lips was Johnny Silverhand. His Of series, endorsed and exclusively used by the Ministry of Magic, had become the gold standard for magical armaments. Whether one sought a legal wand replacement from Ollivander or an unregistered wand for more clandestine purposes, Johnny Silverhands was the place to be. With prices soaring to 3,000 galleons on the black market for a basic set of striker equipment, his products were in high demand, a testament to their quality and the reputation of their maker. As the security team geared up with the latest from Johnny Silverhand's arsenal, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of loyalty, power, and the desire for freedom. Armed to the teeth, they crouched in every corner of the garden, their presence starkly contrasting with the serene environment. Among them, Oxel, known as the Index Finger, scanned the area with a bloodthirsty gaze. He shuffled his feet, a clear sign of his impatience. "Come on, show yourselves, you little pests," he muttered under his breath. The execution platform remained eerily silent, its occupants steadfast in their vigil. Gauss, meanwhile, was busy calculating his potential earnings from the night's endeavor, his fingers moving greedily. Gemini, ever the diplomat, reminded him, "Please, say, Mr. Oxel, let's not forget our primary objective. We are here to oversee the second-level hunt." "Fine, as long as it entertains me," Oxel responded, barely concealing his eagerness. Nearby, a group of star apprentices readied themselves for the hunt, their eyes fixed on the prize. In Johnny Silverhand's office, John flipped through the pages of a book, the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. As night fell, the denizens of Nocturne Alley of the Day retreated, the shops closing their doors in anticipation of the impending battle. Little Barty, meanwhile, turned on the radio, letting the music fill the room as he waited. Tang Mi entered, holding a vinyl record. "Shall I play this for you?" he asked respectfully. "Do it," John replied without looking up, his attention still on his book. The record was placed on the brass-colored gramophone, and as the needle traced the grooves, a melodious tune began to play, reminiscent of a fishing boat gliding over calm waters. But as John turned the page for the third time, the music swelled, mirroring the brewing storm outside. Suddenly, a group of cloaked Death Eaters appeared outside the overturned garden. Their leader let out a high-pitched cackle as they charged toward their target. Amidst the delicate flowers, the air was filled with the sound of spells clashing, sparks flying in every direction. The flowers themselves transformed, morphing into a deadly maze that seemed to consume life itself. Inside, little Barty remained oblivious to the chaos, lost in the music. Outside, green and red lights flickered and intertwined. Some Death Eaters, smirking, cast the Cruciatus Curse, only to be met by security guards whose spells deflected the curses effortlessly. Avada, a Death Eater, began, but before he could finish, a security guard's wand flashed, and a burst of red light sent him flying backward into the thorny embrace of the flowers. The once delicate blooms transformed into vicious thorns, their barbed roots piercing his flesh and dragging him into an abyss from which there was no escape. The security guard's expression remained impassive, the ring on his hand darkening with each fallen foe. As the flower wall isolated the Death Eaters, the guards advanced, methodically dispatching their adversaries. Bones to dust, reducto, a wall of flowers exploded, revealing masked Death Eaters charging forward. Electo, Amicus Caro shouted for his sister. On the other side, the flower wall crumbled, and Electo, mask removed, emerged. She had been entangled in a skirmish with a security guard. Despite her superior strength, his array of equipment gave him the upper hand. "Hey," a playful voice called out. The siblings turned to see a man in a suit, a matchstick dangling from his lips. He looked around at the destroyed garden and said, "The gardener spent so much time on this." As he welcomed the Caro siblings into the fray, his smile was both inviting and menacing. "Welcome to the hunting ground," he said, gesturing for them to proceed. "I hope you enjoy yourselves." The siblings exchanged a look, their confusion evident. Electo pointed her wand at the tall man, prompting a slight frown. "Careful, that's dangerous," he warned. "It's good that you recognize that," Electo retorted, her frustration palpable. The man raised an eyebrow, his smile returning. "I'd rather not resort to violence against a lady," he said before calling out, "Who wants to take on this little white rabbit?" Electo couldn't help but laugh, despite her anger. The term little white rabbit was hardly fitting for someone of her caliber. A sudden flash of red light sent Electo flying, and Oxel, known as the index finger, shouted, "She is my prey." Amicus, taken aback, was about to rush to his sister's aid when a gleaming hook pierced his shoulder, dragging him with immense force into a wall of flowers. Struggling to free himself, he noticed the blood flowing from his wound as a taciturn man watched him intently. After dealing with the siblings, another Death Eater burst into the brush, Ront Hall, causing the men in the hunting grounds to grow restless. With a snap of his fingers, the leader commanded the security team to fall back to the hunting grounds. They lined up, wands raised in unison, and unleashed a blinding spell that enveloped the invading Death Eaters. Their rings dimmed, and the man, raising an eyebrow, remarked, "Much cleaner now." The battle raged until dawn. John closed his book and approached the window, basking in the morning sun. He instructed the clerk, "Inform the guests that the overturned garden will be closed today for repairs." Making his way to the garden, John surveyed the destruction. The security team was busy shoveling away the debris and digging graves for the fallen. Among them was young Barty, silently observing a Death Eater's burial. "Looks like I won," John mused, noting the casualties on both sides. Despite the losses, the Death Eaters had been nearly eradicated, with only the Caro siblings, recent escapees from Azkaban, remaining at large. "You need to keep your promise," John reminded Barty, patting him on the shoulder before stepping into the ravaged garden. Tang Mi, overseeing the restoration, lamented, "My lord, could we choose a different location next time?" "I had an appointment here with Ozzy," John replied nonchalantly, adding, "I think your salary might need adjusting." Tang Mi's expression shifted as he quickly said, "Actually, this place is quite suitable and easy to manage." "I think so too," John agreed with a smile. Observing the captured Death Eaters, he chuckled. "Our friend in the ministry will be pleased." Voldemort, wary of Dumbledore, had not dared to confront them directly, missing the opportunity to encounter the traps John had prepared. John glanced towards Barty Jr.'s house, beneath which bombs made of magic crystals were hidden, ready to be used. Chapter 318, The Sword of Marvolo and St. Mungo. It's as if you've never been injured, the healer at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries remarked with a mix of astonishment and admiration as he examined the Longbottoms during their follow-up visit. This recovery is nothing short of miraculous. It's unheard of for anyone to fully recover from such severe magical trauma. The Longbottoms, who had suffered irreversible damage at the hands of the Death Eaters, were living proof that even the most permanent magical injuries could be healed. The healer couldn't help but express a desire to learn from whoever had managed to achieve such an impossible feat. Mr. Longbottom felt incredibly fortunate that both he and his wife could return to a semblance of normalcy within their lifetimes. It all felt like a beautiful dream to them, one they hoped never to wake from. Holding his wife's hand tightly, Mr. Longbottom saw her smile sweetly back at him. Neville Longbottom had accompanied his parents to the hospital. There, they encountered Harry Potter and his friends, who were visiting the injured Arthur Weasley. Hermione Granger looked at the Longbottoms in surprise, prompting Neville to introduce them. "This is my parents," he said. "Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom," Hermione greeted them hastily, while Ron Weasley and Harry observed the couple with interest. Harry, in particular, felt a mix of emotions. He had learned about the Longbottoms' tragic past from Alastor Moody, yet here they were, looking no different from any other couple, not bearing any visible scars of their torture. Neville's evident happiness made Harry feel a pang of envy. Just then, Harry felt a sharp pain on his forehead and instinctively touched his scar, frowning. Hermione noticed and quickly asked, "What's the matter, Harry? Is your scar hurting again?" Mr. Longbottom regarded Harry with a complex look. As former members of the Order of the Phoenix, the Longbottoms had been well aware of Harry's significance in the fight against Voldemort. "You look a lot like your father," Mr. Longbottom remarked, his voice tinged with emotion. Harry's attention was diverted by a faint glow emanating from a cloth-wrapped object nearby. "What's that?" he asked, grimacing from the pain. Neville, taken aback, followed Harry's gaze and quickly unwrapped the cloth, revealing the source of the glow to everyone's astonishment. The sword of Gryffindor, Harry recognized immediately. The sword's red gemstone was shining brightly, intensifying the pain in Harry's scar. "Get that thing away!" Ron exclaimed in alarm. Neville quickly drew the sword out, and to everyone's surprise, the red light on the sword dimmed after a moment. When Neville sheathed the sword again, Harry's scar ceased to hurt, and the sword's glow faded. What happened? Neville was as puzzled as the rest. After several tests, with the same result each time, Neville failed to notice a pair of eyes watching them intently before their owner hurried away. Harry was left wondering why the sword of Gryffindor would cause his scar to ache. After a moment of hesitation, he asked, "Neville, could I borrow that sword?" Neville handed the sword to Harry, who, upon holding it, felt no pain in his scar, and the gem remained unlit. Both were filled with doubts. Holding the sword, Harry was struck by a realization. This is not the sword of Gryffindor. Despite its identical appearance, something about it felt off. Neville confirmed Harry's suspicion, revealing, "This sword is called Marvolo's sword." Marvolo? The name rang a bell for Harry, but he didn't dwell on it. After returning the sword to Neville, the two discussed recent events, including Arthur Weasley's attack. Harry inquired about Mr. Longbottom's future plans, particularly whether he intended to return to his role as an Auror or rejoin the Order of the Phoenix. Mr. Longbottom, once a celebrated Auror and a hero to many, seemed to have no intention of returning to his former life. Reflecting on his son's repeated pleas not to rejoin the Order, Mr. Longbottom admitted, "We are not as we once were." Harry felt a twinge of sadness as he reflected on the Longbottoms' condition. Their prolonged illness had taken a toll on their physical fitness, a stark contrast to the formidable reputation they once held, as Moody had mentioned. It made Harry wonder if the rest of the Order was aware of the Longbottoms' recovery. After ensuring their health was stable, the Longbottoms prepared to leave the hospital. Neville, seizing the opportunity to reintroduce his parents to the world, decided to take them to Nocturne Alley. Mr. Longbottom expressed his astonishment at the state of the place. After Voldemort's downfall, I never imagined this place, once a haven for Death Eaters and dark wizards, could change for the better. Neville, sharing a moment of regret, mentioned, "It's a shame the overturned garden is under repair today. It's something you should have seen." The magic within their world had a way of mending what was broken, and by the afternoon, the overturned garden had been restored to its former glory. Meanwhile, John found himself at Silverhand Manor, confronted by an irate old Barty. The Ministry of Magic had informed him of the chaos at the overturned gardens, and rather than dispatching Aurors, he sought out Johnny Silverhand directly. He criticized John for his reckless actions, suggesting that a more strategic approach could have captured the Death Eaters. John, donning a silver mask, approached old Barty with a chuckle, suggesting they celebrate instead. "Celebrate?" Old Barty responded incredulously, unable to see the reason for joy in their recent confrontation with Death Eaters. John, with a meaningful look, poured wine into glasses, hinting at a different kind of victory. "This incident will make your son less rebellious," he revealed, catching old Barty off guard. The mention of his son visibly affected old Barty. He had long tried to distance himself from the painful memories and the strained relationship with his son, who was accused of torturing the Longbottoms. Yet, John suggested a different truth, one where his son was merely an unfortunate bystander, wrongfully accused. Old Barty's disbelief was palpable as his wine glass shattered on the floor. John pressed on, urging him to reconsider the narrative surrounding his son, hinting that the Longbottoms themselves could corroborate this new perspective. "The Longbottoms?" Old Barty echoed, skepticism laced in his voice, unable to fathom their involvement. John confirmed their recovery and suggested old Barty verify this at St. Mungo's. The news struck old Barty profoundly, leaving him oscillating between sitting and standing, a man grappling with a revelation that could potentially mend the fractured relationship with his son. John addressed the agitated man before him. "Old Batty, this isn't the right time for such discussions. You should visit St. Mungo's for a thorough checkup." He observed Barty Crouch Sr.'s restlessness. Upon hearing John's suggestion, Crouch Sr. hastily exited the study. A pressing question consumed his thoughts. Had the Longbottoms truly recovered, and was his son implicated in the events of that fateful night? If, as John suggested, Barty Jr. had been unjustly accused, how was he to confront the son he had abandoned for over a decade? Should he admit that his career had taken precedence over justice for his son, or claim that a father's love had ultimately guided his actions? The weight of these considerations was too much to bear at the moment. In his rush to leave, Crouch Sr. nearly stumbled as he boarded his carriage, a far cry from the composed demeanor expected of the Minister of Magic. Chapter 319, Disappointing Reply and Paper Review. Regardless of the confirmation from Old Batty, John received promising news. A letter adorned with the Belby family crest arrived from Basil, closely followed by another from the Wizengamot. "The initial review of the Blood Curse paper has been successful," John read from Dharma Alex Belby's letter, which bore a formal tone and the distinguished Belby coat of arms. Dharma Alex seldom resorted to using the family crest, given his strained relationship with his elder brother. He reserved it for occasions demanding a significant level of formality. Upon reading the letter, John grasped the gravity of the situation. The Wizengamot had found no faults in the thesis itself and were forced to scrutinize other aspects. They expressed skepticism regarding the collaboration between a Hogwarts student and one of the contemporary leading potion masters. To them, it seemed implausible that the student's contribution was anything but minor, despite the shared authorship implying equal credit. This issue was compounded by concerns over potential school favoritism and the implications for the Order of Merlin awards. For Dharma Alex, already a recipient of the Order of Merlin First Class, another award was merely a bonus. However, for John, who had yet to receive such recognition, it represented a significant honor. The Wizengamot's reluctance to hastily award the Order of Merlin to a student perceived as scrambling for accolades was evident. "That's why a debate has been scheduled," John noted, opening another letter from the Wizengamot. The tone was markedly different, laced with arrogance and skepticism towards John's achievements, contrasting sharply with their demeanor towards Johnny Silverhand. It was as if they had already branded John a charlatan seeking unwarranted glory. The final argument at the Wizengamot is set for December 21st, the letter stated, conspicuously omitting Dharma Alex's name. This was a direct challenge to John Wick. Dismissing the letter with a flick of his wrist, John watched it burn to ashes. His attention was soon captured by an owl delivering another letter. Recognizing the sender's cautious nature, John opened the envelope to find Slughorn's long-awaited reply. However, the content was disappointing. "John, thank you for the exquisite mead. It's the finest I've received over the years," Slughorn had written, skillfully dodging the question at hand. The Christmas mead had failed to elicit the desired response from the former Slytherin head. With a stoic expression, John burned Slughorn's letter. "It seems I must seek the answers on my own," he concluded, stepping out onto the balcony to catch the falling snowflakes. The snowflakes lingered in his palm, unmelting, as he returned to his study. A gray crystal ball sat on the table. John flicked it, and the smoky interior revealed 3 figures. Withdrawing his hand, the snowflakes remained, a slight chill emanating from his palm. "This year has brought an abundance of snow," he mused. The heavy snowfall continued for several days around Christmas, blanketing the overturned garden in white. Upon John's return to Hogwarts, he found the school unusually quiet in his absence. Tom, having not accompanied John, was left in Malfoy's care. It was unclear how many times Malfoy had dozed off while walking the dog, but when John found him, he was half buried in a snowdrift, a music box playing a beautiful melody beside him, and the dog sleeping soundly. John paused, a moment of silence enveloping him as he reflected on the scene before him. John realized he needed to curb Tom's tendency to fall asleep at inopportune times. While it was endearing in young dogs, it was less so in young wizards. After turning off the music box, he nudged Malfoy awake and lifted Tom into his arms. Malfoy, looking slightly bewildered with icicles of snot dangling from his nose, struggled to his feet. Tom, upon seeing John, wagged his tongue joyfully, though John kept him at arm's length. "John, you're back," Malfoy said, his voice trembling slightly from the cold. John replied with a hint of remorse, "I'm sorry to have troubled you with walking the dog, Draco. Head back and have Daphne prepare some hot wine for you." Malfoy, attempting to lighten the mood, joked, "If you say so, I might just forget about the cold." He shook off the snow from his clothing, adding, "Neville returned early, and Daphne has been quite irritable since receiving a letter." Malfoy's expression was one of genuine concern as he recounted Daphne's frightening demeanor the previous day. If he hadn't known better, he would have thought she had been jilted. With a puzzled look, Malfoy inquired, "Did you say something to upset Daphne?" "No," John replied, certain he hadn't corresponded with Daphne recently. As they made their way back to the castle, discussing the possible reasons for Daphne's mood, they encountered Peeves. The poltergeist was notorious for his year-round mischief, especially during the holidays when the castle was quieter. With fewer students around due to Umbridge's influence, Peeves had taken to vandalizing an unused classroom. Upon seeing John, Peeves immediately ceased his destruction and approached him with a sly proposition, hoping to cause trouble for Umbridge, whom he referred to disdainfully. John, with a smirk, agreed to fund Peeves's antics, instructing him to collect the payment from the Weasley twins after the holidays. Back in the Slytherin common room, John was confronted with the sight of an agitated Daphne. Her usually composed demeanor was replaced by one of intense fury as she scribbled a venomous letter. John accidentally glimpsed the contents, filled with threats and insults, clearly meant for someone who had wronged her. The atmosphere was tense until Daphne noticed John's presence. Mortified, she screamed, covered her face, and retreated to her bedroom, only to emerge briefly to retrieve the incriminating letter. John and Malfoy exchanged a look of disbelief, both choosing to remain silent about the incident. John, half-jokingly, warned Malfoy to forget what he had seen for his own safety, hinting at Daphne's potential for drastic measures. As the holiday drew to a close, John prepared for a visit to the Wizengamot, reflecting on his previous encounter with the judicial body during the Dementor incident. This time, he felt out of place without his usual disguise, a reminder of the complexities of his double life. As he walked through the passage, John noticed significant improvements in the Ministry of Magic's appearance. The most notable change was the entrance, which now featured a second, more welcoming expression for guests. Dharma Alex, clad in a solemn purple robe, approached with a cane and joined John in the elevator. With a serious tone, he offered, "If you're feeling apprehensive, I can protect you." John chuckled in response. "Wouldn't that just play into their hands?" "They're always so convinced of their own righteousness," Dharma Alex replied with a smile, shaking his head. "They fail to recognize the difference between a genius and an ordinary person." When the elevator doors opened, they stepped out into a different scene from John's last visit. Instead of a trial court filled with members of the Wizengamot, the room was occupied by several academic masters. Upon laying eyes on John's youthful appearance, some skeptics burst into mocking laughter, seemingly convinced they had already seen through the young man's supposed charade. Dharma Alex stepped aside, giving John an encouraging wink. "John Wick, it's time to show the wizarding world that you are a beacon of brilliance from Hogwarts." As the onlookers continued to watch, skepticism etched on their faces, John took a confident step forward, ready to challenge their preconceptions and prove his worth. Chapter 320, The Wizengamot and the Order of Merlin. The Wizengamot and the Order of Merlin share many common members. Being knighted as a Merlin significantly increases one's chances of being invited to join the Wizengamot. While not all Wizengamot members are part of the Order of Merlin, all members of the Order must belong to the Wizengamot. This prestigious body not only awards the Order of Merlin, but also functions as the wizarding world's highest court and a platform for scholarly exchange. John found himself standing before the Wizengamot, facing a situation that demanded his full attention. The room held about a dozen members, each distinguished by their medals. Among them, John recognized a few faces from Harry's previous interrogation, where they had defended Harry's innocence. The most senior among them was Griselda Marchbanks, a woman with an impressive educational background, who was also responsible for administering that year's OWL exams. Acknowledging the assembly with a slight nod, John chose to remain standing. With a hint of arrogance, he asked, "Is there any question that I need to answer now?" His tone elicited a few frowns of disapproval. A bearded man, reminiscent of characters from film and television dramas, addressed him politely. 6 months ago, Mr. Dharma Alex Belby intended to publish an article. We have several questions about it and require clarification from the author." John responded with a chuckle, "I'd be happy to clarify any doubts you may have." The first to speak was a middle-aged man, wrapped so tightly in his clothes he resembled a dumpling, covered in scabies. "This article discusses the Blood Demon Curse, the creation of the Blood Demon Potion, and related matters," he began, rambling on until the bearded man interrupted him sharply. "Burmis, enough with the nonsense. Get to the point." Burmis, looking somewhat comical as he shrank back, muttered, "All right, I wanted to inquire about the Blood Demon Potion's refinement and its inspiration." All eyes turned to John, who admitted, "I must acknowledge that Dharma Alex Belby was the original creator of the Blood Demon Potion." This confession seemed to make some members think John was conceding defeat. However, John quickly added, "However, I have proposed several enhancements." The inception of the Blood Demon Potion was driven by curiosity and the satisfaction derived from solving seemingly insurmountable curses, John explained, pacing thoughtfully. He detailed the potion's evolution from its origins as an improved version of the Wolfsbane potion to the significant modifications he later introduced. The members' initial disdain transformed into genuine interest and respect. Even Griselda Marchbanks, who had overseen Dumbledore's exams, appeared impressed. They scrutinized the documents in their hands, copies made with a spell, realizing that the potion's only similarity to the Wolfsbane potion was its author. John's modifications were not mere suggestions, they were revolutionary. After John concluded his explanation, Burmis's eyes shone with admiration. He turned to the bearded wizard, exclaiming, "Buspa, this young man is a genius." Burmis, a member of the League of Potion Masters and a correspondent of both Dharma Alex and John, was among the most convinced of John's unadulterated talent. The bearded Buspa, now unable to contain his excitement, yelled in agreement. "Silence," Buspa commanded, his expression shifting as he addressed John with a newfound seriousness. "We've never successfully navigated the 3 critical stages required to break the blood curse: identification, decryption, and restoration." "With all due respect," John replied, his smile tinged with confidence, "we now have a genuine case." "Really?" Buspa's composure slipped, his voice cracking with excitement. "You mean to say you've cured someone?" "To be precise," John affirmed with a slow nod, "yes." The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Even the venerable Makibundu, a centenarian, exclaimed, "We need witnesses." "Of course," John agreed, albeit reluctantly. He had been hesitant to involve Nagini in this matter, but Dharma Alex had secretly written to her. Aware of this, Nagini had willingly come forward. As they spoke, a woman in a wheelchair entered the room. Her youthful appearance unsettled some onlookers. It was Nagini. Dharma Alex, adjusting his attire, stepped forward with a calm demeanor. "I believe it's time for my involvement to be disclosed," he announced. Questions were directed at Nagini, who responded with calm assurance. After thorough examination, the assembly reached an astonishing conclusion. Nagini, once afflicted by a blood curse, had been cured. The evidence was undeniable, rendering further discussion superfluous. The group's perception of John transformed from initial skepticism to shock, and finally to awe. John was not only Dharma Alex's protege, but also a remarkable healer. His wisdom and prowess earned him respect and admiration, even excusing his earlier perceived arrogance. After all, isn't a certain degree of arrogance expected of the young and brilliant? "John Wick," Buspa declared, rising to his feet with the others following suit. His voice carried a tone of deep respect. "Your breakthrough has resolved a dilemma that has long plagued the wizarding world. Mr. Wick, I assure you, you will be honored with the Order of Merlin," Buspa continued, bowing in a gesture of respect, with the others mirroring his action. Marchban, reflecting on a lifetime of overseeing exams, mused, "Hogwarts' new luminary, so radiant, so brilliant." She anticipated this year's exams with eagerness, hoping to witness a talent surpassing even Dumbledore's. John Wick's name was destined to become legendary, transcending the confines of Hogwarts. The Blood Demon Potion, while not as universally applicable as the Wolfsbane Potion, nor the Blood Curse as widespread, was nonetheless a significant achievement. John's youth only added to the impressiveness of his accomplishment, positioning him to be the youngest recipient of the Order of Merlin in history. The ceremony to bestow the honors was swiftly arranged, outpacing the recognition of Dharma Alex. The niche appeal of the Blood Demon Potion and the extended review process had delayed previous acknowledgments. John discussed Nagini's recovery timeline. "By March, you should be fully restored," he assured her, recommending she continue her recuperation at the branch. "If my recovery contributes to you receiving the Merlin Medal, then it's all worthwhile," Nagini smiled, her spirits lifted by the prospect. John glanced at Dharma Alex, the old man leaning on his cane. "The Merlin Medal pales in comparison to your well-being," he responded, a hint of frustration in his voice. "That madman Voldemort has his sights set on you." "He believes I'm dead," Nagini teased with a wink. "He probably thinks you were the one who killed me." John had indeed eradicated the fragment of Voldemort's soul within Nagini, leading Voldemort to assume her death. Consequently, the Death Eaters who infiltrated the branch were unaware of Nagini's true identity. "We can't be too cautious. Voldemort has a knack for returning from the dead," John cautioned, his experiences with Voldemort making him wary of the Dark Lord's resourcefulness. As they approached the Ministry of Magic's hall, Johnson intercepted John, advising, "You should return to school." Nagini tugged at John's clothes, coaxing him to lean closer. "Johnson admires you," she whispered mischievously. "It would be quite the revelation to discover your true identity." While assisting in Nagini's recovery, John navigated the complexities of his dual life, balancing his academic responsibilities with the broader implications of his groundbreaking work in the wizarding world. While abroad, John's illness seemed to improve, and his usually gentle elder sister, Nagini, became more lively as well. John couldn't help but shrug at the thought. It amused him to imagine the reaction of someone strong and formidable upon discovering that the person they admired was merely a student. As they moved through the crowded streets, Johnson protectively pushed Nagini ahead of him, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. He was on high alert, ready to confront anyone whose gaze lingered on Nagini for more than 3 seconds with a fierce glare. His protective instincts were not unfounded. In a world where danger could lurk around any corner, especially for those with connections to the magical community, Johnson's vigilance was a necessary shield. He was determined to ensure Nagini's safety, no matter the cost.